Good morning. This meeting of the Task Force for Reviewing the Connectivity and Technology Needs of Precision Agriculture in the United States is called to order. I'd like to welcome you all to the last meeting of this term of the Task Force. Welcome to the Task Force members joining us here in the FCC headquarters and those online. We also welcome members of the public here and online at fcc.gov/live. I'm Christy Schumann, and I'm the designated federal officer for the task force. I'm joined here by Emily Kaditz and Tom Hastings, our deputy DFOs. Let's proceed with roll call. Teddy Bekele, Chair, Land O'Lakes.
Present.
Dr. Michael Adeline, Vice Chair, South Dakota State University.
Here.
Dale Artho, Dale and Kathy Artho Farms.
Present.
The Honorable Dan Watermeyer, Commissioner of the Nebraska Public Service Commission.
Present.
Dr. Shrikala Bajwa, Montana State University College of Agriculture and Montana Agricultural Experiment Station.
Present.
Andy Bater, Fifth Estate Growers LLC.
Present. Good morning.
Julie Bushell, Irrigation Association.
Present.
Anthony Dillard, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
Present.
Michael Gomes, Topcon Agriculture.
Present.
Heather Hampton Nodal, Nodal Limited Farms.
Present.
Robert Hance, Midwest Energy and Communications. Ryan Krogh, John Deere.
Present.
Jennifer Manor, Hughes Network Systems, LLC.
Present.
Joy Sterling, Iron Horse Vineyards.
Good morning.
Jimmy Todd, Nextech.
Present.
And from the Department of Agriculture, we have Aileen Mafness. We do have a quorum, so with that, I will hand it over to Task Force Chair Teddy Bekele to start the meeting. Teddy?
Great. Thank you, Christy, and good morning, everyone. So glad to see you all here. I think we have a good presence in person here, and then I thank you for those of you who are joining us online as well. So I'm so glad we're here. We were able to finally make it with, it was a long road over the last 2 years and lots of discussions, lots of documents, and I'm excited that we're here sort of to the final meeting of this term specifically. So what we have in the agenda today, it's not too packed, as we were going to spend a lot of time with discussions around the document itself. So we'll start out with some opening remark by Commissioner Gomez. So we're so excited that she's here, and so she'll have a few words for us to kick us off. From that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. He graciously agreed to do a presentation on kind of where the future of precision agriculture is going, and specifically what Deere is thinking about in that space. And I do think that's going to be a really exciting presentation for us and fitting today, right? Because that's exactly what we're here for. What does the future look like? What do we have to prepare ourselves for? And then from that, we're going to get into more of the details of the document. So the first thing we'll do is probably review the recommendations. So each working group chair will review each recommendation. We'll have some brief words about it, maybe some questions, and then we'll move from there. If there are things that need to be discussed in detail, we'll put them in a parking lot, and then we'll get through the whole executive summary, which kind of encompasses the entire document. From there, we'll probably break for lunch, have a break for that probably outside of the building here, for those of you who are in person. And then when we get back together, we will talk about any modifications, additions, changes we want to make to the document itself. Some of those things we put on the parking lot item, we will discuss them at that time, see if there's a different way we want to craft some language or some wording. And then once we're done with that, we'll get to a spot where we can then approve the document. So we'll go through and we'll do a vote. And then hopefully we get to a consensus. That's my hope, but if not, that's okay as well. But we should have a healthy discussion, and I want to thank everybody for the engagement in advance. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Gomez for an opening remark.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Bekele and Bekele. Apologies. Vice Chairman Adeline and members of the Precision Agriculture Connectivity Task Force. Welcome to everyone both in the room, here at the Commission meeting room, and those participating remotely. As you mentioned, I'm Anna Gomez, the newest Commissioner of the FCC, and it's great to be with you all this morning. The task force has provided its expertise on precision agriculture to the Commission in consultation with the U.S. Department of Agriculture since the establishment of the 2018 Farm Bill. As the past few years have shown us, staying connected has never been more important, and broadband connectivity has proven to be essential to meeting the production and sustainability challenges facing our agricultural and food systems. To be sure, it is vital that our country meet the demand for food to sustain our communities. You've engaged in incredibly complex issues, provided thoughtful recommendations to the Commission, and done so under extraordinary circumstances created by the COVID-19 pandemic. We greatly appreciate all your hard work and your important contributions. Many of you will be back in the new charter, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. And I look forward to engaging with this task force as a new commissioner. The issues your efforts have contributed towards over the past 2 years have helped ensure that farmers and ranchers are connected to high-speed internet, which is critical to advancing modern farming techniques that help improve the efficiency, profitability, and sustainability of our country's agricultural lands. We look forward to hearing the reports on today's agenda, and we thank the working group members for all their hard work in preparation for today's meeting. Thank you again to all the members for all you do. Thank you as well to the Commission staff who helped make this possible, including the task force's designated federal officers, Christy Schumann, Emily Kaditz, and Thomas Hastings. If there is anything we at the FCC can do to support you and your task force work, please do not hesitate to reach out to Christy or the other task force staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gomez. We really appreciate those opening remarks, and we look forward to working with you as well. And yeah, we're excited about the recommendations this task force is bringing forward, both to the FCC as well as the USDA. So with that, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the future of agriculture. And I believe Ryan is going to will bring up the presentation here on the screen, and then I will turn it over to Ryan for to kick us off from that.
All right, it looks like we're up there and running. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity, especially in short notice. So hopefully the information is of value today and insightful. Before we get into that, just a little bit about myself. So I've been with Deere over 20 years now, driving innovative solutions there. I managed connectivity for Deere for a number of years across the enterprise. In my prior role, I led a team of folks that led things like autonomy, See and Spray, we'll talk about that, battery electric in small tractors, driving precision ag into a multitude of different production system solutions. I recently took a new role and now will lead the combine and front end equipment business, but still driving innovative solutions. And so today what I actually want to go through is 3 different areas. First, talking about what are the macro level customer problems that are out there and facing. I always think it's good to start with what's the problem we're solving. If we're thinking about, okay, what's the future of precision ag? Well, let's start with the problems and understand what those are. Then talk a little bit about the technology and how the technology is advancing and how we think about getting that on equipment. And then finally, we'll go through a corn and soy production cycle, and we'll start with planting and then go onto application, harvest, and then tillage, and talk about some of the advancements of technology within each one of those steps. So with that, the first major problem that's out there is we have a growing population. I think we all know this, that our population is expected to grow up to 10 billion by 2050, and with that growing population, we need greater output. But we also know that there's pressures to reduce our inputs, to manage our water, our nutrients, our soil better, and continue to drive for sustainable practices. So as we think about this problem, I really think about it as like, how do you maximize output while reducing inputs, right? And so this is really the first problem that we think about as we look to the future. The next is that growers don't have control over all their variables, and I think it's important to recognize that there's a lot of different variables that a customer has to deal with, or that a grower, has to deal with, and every season, every day, even every hour can look different. And so as we look to the future, how do we think about understanding and helping to gain insight on those variables and provide as much control as we can to the uncontrollable elements of a grower. The next is managing decisions. The number of decisions that a grower has to make on a given day is probably well over 1,000. And there's a multitude of different data streams that are coming together that they've really got to fuse to run their business. And, with each decision, there's a question of, do I want to take a risk on this or not? And one wrong decision can really cost an entire season. And so as we think about the future of precision ag, how do we help reduce that risk? A grower has 40 times roughly in their lifetime to get it right. And so how much risk do you really want to take with each one of those chances? How much experimentation is acceptable? And whether that's trying a different piece of equipment, trying a different product, trying a different rate, you name it, there's just thousands of decisions that customers have to make. And the last, they're all doing this within a decreasing labor pool. So there's fewer hands on the farm than ever before. We continue to hear that through our discussions within our working group. And I hear it as I go talk with customers, is this is a large problem that they face, right? So less than 2% of the U.S. workforce is in ag, and it's not expected to grow meaningfully over the next several years. Average farmer is 55 years old and works 12 to 18 hours a day. That's not sustainable, especially with the other challenges that we talked about. So as we think about the future of precision ag, how do we address the labor pool shortage as well? And again, this all boils down to one chance a year. One chance every year to get it right and really understand how do we help bring the best data and the best solutions to make every year the best year possible. And so for some perspective, that's over 5,000 acres, that's over 750 million plants. So think about if you have a plant at your house and what you do to keep it alive and manage it, and to reach our goals and to really feed our future population, we've got to manage every single seed and every single plant to be truly successful. So that kind of sums up, some of the major themes and problems. I'm sure we've all talked about those in our working groups, and hopefully those resonate with you. The future then is, it's not traditional agriculture that's going to solve this. It's not bigger, faster, stronger. The next frontier is really automated, easy to use, and more precise. Managing every single seed, managing every single drop, being intentional with every single action that happens. On the equipment side of things, we think about it of every job that's executed, is it executed to the best level possible for every single plant? And so I really like this comment here around superhuman performance. So you may think about automation of, okay, when it's time, it goes up or it goes down, or some mechanical thing happens. But really, automation is beyond that. It's how do you take a group of engineers and a group of agronomists and a group of logistics experts and pack all that brain power into a machine and build the context around it to actually automate it. Not just, make the mechanical thing happen, but make it happen for a reason. And so one of the things that I'll talk about is sense, decide, and act. And so how do we get the real-time sensors to make sure that the action, the automation, isn't just a repetitive automation happening, it's an intentional automation based on context of what is happening at that very moment, at that very place where that seed or that plant is located. And all of that, I should say, to increase, while doing that, increase profitability, increase sustainability, and productivity for customers. We can't sacrifice any of that as we go forward, right? So we can't give up productivity for sustainability or vice versa. We've got to bring them all along together. And it's got to be profitable for a grower to drive adoption. So it's a very, very sensitive balance between all three of those for customers. So diving a little bit then into the technology. So as we think about that, we've had things like GPS. However, it continues to get better over time. We continue to make incremental improvements in accuracy. Real-time data, I think, is one that resonates with this group. Connectivity is the foundation for real-time data. But being able to bring the right pieces of data off the machine to a customer and have that equipment on there. Our sensors are evolving and continuing to get better and better. Cameras are playing a much, much bigger role and will play a much bigger role in agriculture going forward. CVML, computer vision machine learning, will be a key to unlock things that we don't even know about today. And then the communication. Again, being the connectivity task force, this all rides along communication. Without communication, the end-to-end automation can't happen, and we can't transform agriculture. And you'll see that in some of the examples that I'll talk about, is that the solutions just won't work without connectivity to the level required, and we will start to have acres where you can adopt the technology and acres where you can't adopt the technology. And connectivity shouldn't be the deciding factor for a grower of whether they can or can't adopt precision ag long term. So diving in a little bit, let's get into planting when we put the seed in the ground. So as we think about, or is the image on the screen here is 36 row unit planter, and think about those as 36 electrified robots going through the field. And those go through the field at over 10 miles an hour. And so there's some amazing technology that's coming where we can look right in the trench as that seed is placed. And so what you see on the lower left-hand side of the screen is the human view, and I think in the room it's a little hard to see, but what you see is the trench, and then the seed is placed in that trench. And the white little speckles around that is residue. On the right side then, you can see the machine view, or the CVML view of that same view. And so what's happening here, as I click, is as the customer goes through the field, seed is placed in the trench, and that camera can see what's happening. It can see, okay, is there too much residue? Is my depth right? Is the soil forming correctly? Is the trench forming correctly? And then we can make a decision and act to change it. So in this, what you saw was an adjustment of the row cleaner by the customer to adjust it based on how much residue is in the trench. But just to give you a little feel of how fast this happens, we speed it up to real time, and it gets a little choppy, but that is how fast it's going. It would be impossible for a human to look at that video feed and make decisions and make any meaningful assessment about what's going on in real time. But with CVML, we can give feedback to the operator and let them know that, hey, you need to make an adjustment. And they then in real time can make that adjustment and then have confidence that their job is being executed the way that they want it to be. So this is just a little view of, in the planting step, of how CVML can help change the future of agriculture. But not only with just placing the seed, placing fertilizer. This product here is called Exact Shot, and so it, as a seed is placed, it places starter fertilizer directly on the seed. Today, that is done with a continuous band or a continuous stream of fertilizer that's placed. By placing it directly on the seed, you can save up to 66% of the product you put down, because you're not fertilizing between the seeds where the plant can't utilize that fertilizer anyways. And so being able to understand when is that seed coming out, timing that to dose that seed precisely is a great example of robotics coming to market to have, not only a sustainable impact on reducing fertilizer by up to 66%, but that same reduction in fertilizer is cost savings and increases profitability to a customer as well. So and then it also raises productivity because you have to fill up your fertilizer tanks less often as you're planting. And so this is a great example of how do you go after productivity, profitability, and sustainability for a customer, that these solutions are out there and they are possible with the advancements in technology, particularly in robotics. Switching to the next step in the process then, after the corn or soybeans have come out of the ground and we want to spray them. So this is a sprayer with a 120-foot boom, and it has cameras and vision processing units on it that go through the field, and you can see little spurts of spray coming out, and it is seeing weeds and then only spraying the weeds. And so it can have the impact of reducing herbicide application rates by up to 70% with the same net effect for the grower. And that's all due to the capabilities of cameras and then on-time vision processing units. And the amazing thing about this is that as that camera sees the weed, that vision processing unit decides, hey, that's a weed. It sends a signal to the valve body. The valve opens. Droplets come out of that spray nozzle and hit those weeds in less time than it takes you to blink your eye. And so pretty amazing capability, and this is just the beginning. There's going to be other use cases and applications that we don't know about that will come in other production systems, other steps, other areas, and really it's cameras and VPU and being able to see what a customer could see and then doing it in a superhuman way that will help unlock the future of precision ag. So as we go to the next step, then it's time for harvest. Harvest is a particularly challenging time of year. Heather can probably attest to that she just went through that as we were talking prior to the meeting. A lot of coordination happens. With our combine there, in high-yielding corn, that combine needs to be unloading 40 to 45% of the time to maintain productive. And so that means that grain cart is coming up and going away and coming up and going away on almost a continual basis. And so connectivity is key. Sharing the data, organizing the fleet, anticipating and understanding where everything's happening is really critical to maintaining a productive harvest. And then the last one is maybe the most exciting. We'll talk about autonomy. And this gets into fall tillage, could be spring tillage. And so the image on the screen here is an 8R tractor, and it has cameras on the front and on the back with other sensors on the implement, and then leveraging GPS technology to be able to navigate through the field, without a human operator in the cab. And so this really is the future of agriculture. And so I have a quick video here to give you a customer testimonial about autonomy.
When you start out in the spring, you work the soil, and it just smells so fresh. When you till it up, and it's just the greatest smell. When I started farming, there basically was no technology. Every tractor was driven manually, everything was done manually. You'd be planting, you had to follow a line. If the sun was wrong, you would lose the line. Darkness, you couldn't see your marks. Moisture, you couldn't see your mark. Then you'd get squiggly rows. My name is Doug Nims. I'm a farmer from Blue Earth, Minnesota. I'm a fourth-generation farmer, and I raise approximately 2,000 acres of corn and soybeans. I really never thought I would see an autonomous tractor in my farming career. For me, it was really exciting the first time I got to take the autonomous tractor to the field, swipe my phone, watch the tractor start with no one in the cab, start doing tillage, come to the end of the field, turn on the end, do the tillage just as well as I can do myself with no one in the cab. I can pull up the app, I can monitor the tractor, see how much of the field it's got tilled, I can check the fuel level, I can check the app to see how much of the field is left. If there was something in the field that it wasn't sure about, the tractor will stop and alert me. Is this something I can go around? Do I need to go out and remove an object from the field? The app gives me all this information so I can monitor everything very closely. On farms, labor is always a challenge. We need labor for lots and lots of hours for short periods of time. The auto steer and technology has helped reduce our labor load, which makes my life a lot easier. Autonomy will help because we will be able to put a tractor out in the field and let it run for 24 hours a day because it's not manned. But it also helps us with the weather because we can run so hard when soil conditions are fit. The thing that excites me the most about autonomy is not be locked in a tractor cab all day. It will just allow me to run my business better because I can just pay closer attention to other tasks. Now we'll be doing the jobs that we always wanted to get done but never had time to because we were in the cab all the time. Farmers are fairly traditional, but I have a feeling that once they try it, they will become very accepting of it. I think the tractor can do a better job than I can do. Autonomy, it's going to be a life changer for me.
So a couple things to highlight around what Doug said. You know, it allows him to get out of the cab to do a more valuable job. And it allows him to do something they wouldn't have gotten done. And so it frees up time for them. But this really couples with the labor part of it. But the key thing is it couples with the job automation that I talked about from the previous steps: sense, decide, and act. So removing the operator, being able to send something autonomously is great, but you also have to know that the job is being executed the exact way that you wanted it executed. And so the combination of these technologies coming together and eventually coming across all the different steps will be what really changes the future of agriculture. And so CVML, just from an autonomy sake, is great, but it's the combination, again, with the automation and understanding the context that really brings both of these together. One quick story about autonomy and connectivity. So we had a customer that actually I was just visiting this past Friday that is a customer that's running autonomous tractors right now for us. And the very first time that she experienced it, we went to her field and the dealer was with her to help get it all set up, and got on the phone into Operations Center and swiped to have the tractor go. The horn and the lights all flash and say, hey, it's all clear. The vehicle starts up and it drives off. And her field had just a little bit of a hill peak in the middle of it, and the tractor drove up over the hill and down, and then they stood there and they waited. And they waited with anticipation of, is it going to come back? And it didn't come back. Because the way our system operates is that there's cameras on there, and it makes sure it's a safe zone. And with autonomy, if it sees something it doesn't recognize, it will stop. And then through connectivity, it sends that message back to a central command center. Images are reviewed to determine what did it see and can it go forward or not. If for sure not, it informs the grower on their form or on their phone that they have a problem, they need to go address it. What happened was it got out of connectivity. So it couldn't send that signal back to say, hey, I have a problem. And so it stopped. And then after so long, the person would have been informed and said, hey, your tractor's out of connectivity. You should go check on it. It might be running, it might not. It just depends if it saw something that it didn't recognize or not. And so I share that as an example of how important connectivity is to the future of precision ag. Because as these solutions to continue to advance, and as we make improvements, not just with equipment, but all the other elements within the ag ecosystem as well, it's not going to happen without connectivity. We will have acres that can have the future of precision ag and acres without the future of precision ag. And so I'll leave it there and say automation and autonomy is real, it's ready, and it's in market today, but it relies on connectivity going forward. So thank you. Questions or discussion?
Yeah, no, thank you, Ryan. That was awesome. It's exactly, I think, is a perfect presentation for our kind of the last meeting. So I'll open up to questions. So if you have a question for Ryan, if they're in the room or online, just raise your hand and we'll let you go. Dr. Adeline has a question. Go ahead, Dr. Adeline.
Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation, but what I was wondering, if you move away from the commodity crops and go to what I would call truck farming, the lettuce, the vegetable types, is there work being done in that area? Because that certainly has a high cost of labor component to it. So what's being done in other areas besides the commodities?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dr. Adeline. I don't know that I'm the best position to answer that. I know that there's work going on there, but that's not necessarily the core focus for John Deere. We don't manufacture equipment particularly in the harvest step of some of those today. So I would have to defer to that. However, I would say in high-value crops, we are participating there. So think of trees or vineyards, tree nuts, vineyards, those types of applications. And then certainly anything that's pulled with a tractor, investigations are happening as well.
Thank you.
Heather?
As a farmer, I have to ask, are those cost savings after the cost of the equipment upgrades?
Yeah, so absolutely anything that we come to market with has to be profitable both for the customer and for John Deere, right? It's got to be, we've got to bring value, absolutely, to drive adoption, right? So absolutely, Heather.
Jimmy and then Dr. Chicago.
So one of the things you talked about was a savings of labor. But when you start bringing in automated devices, the type of labor that needs to be done is dramatically different. Most of my friends who have small and mid-sized farms, they do a lot of labor of that equipment themselves. So now we're looking at another challenge in the future is having folks that are technologically trained to be able to work on this. So, you know, that's something we would definitely want to keep in mind because working on electronics is a lot different than diesel mechanics. So,
yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. And I think if I said reduces labor, I think that maybe was a misstatement. It's really, I think it's offsetting labor, right? It's moving labor from one place to another. It's getting something done that you weren't able to get done. And then I think the skill, upskilling or the change in skilling of our workforce within agriculture is going to have to reflect the future as well. Absolutely.
Thank you for that presentation. I have a multi-part question. One is, you know, there are organic, regenerative, all kinds of farming out there, and I often hear this comment that precision agriculture is for conventional farmers, not for organic or regenerative farmers because they don't use chemicals. And I'm wondering whether you have looked into that, that sector. It is a growing sector. Secondly, whenever I see a presentation on precision agriculture, it is all about crops. And I am from Montana. The western part of the country is openly grazed livestock, or at least half of Montana is that. So I am wondering about your thoughts and the future of precision agriculture in livestock sector. I'll stick with those two.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take the second one first. We definitely work to figure out how our systems of where our business focus complements livestock, dairies, et cetera, but not our core area. But I think there's a lot of parallels from a technology standpoint of CVML usage in livestock and dairies. I know I've visited several different dairies that are very technologically advanced. They're monitoring feeding, they're monitoring health, temperature, more things than I know of. I'm not the expert in that area, but I think the thing will be of how do we figure out how the systems work together going forward. Sorry, your first question.
Organic regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, so organic, definitely. Obviously, you saw some different examples of applying herbicides or pesticides, but whether it gets into biologicals or however that is, whatever the product is getting applied, we're not trying to be unique to that. And then I think the autonomy side of thing is universal, ideally to whatever implement or job step is trying to be completed.
I will ask one more question. I'm very interested in a fully autonomous farming or ranching. Is it possible with the technology John Deere or other companies have today?
So our goal is to have a fully autonomous production system by 2030. And that would be more in the row crop segment versus in livestock, but that's where our focus is first. Yep.
Yeah, Julie?
Thanks, Teddy. I just wanted to go back to Jimmy's comment. I think I'll speak for our work group here. We actually feel like autonomy and technology on the farm will keep the next generation in the rural communities, allow them to farm, but also allow them to seek the things that make them excited, whether that's a cybersecurity specialist or an IT specialist. So thank you for the presentation.
Dale, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. There was a question about us being able to work on some of this machinery and this technology, just like we work on diesel tractors. You know, when new technology comes out, we learn how to adapt, we learn how to work on it, and we implement that within our farming systems. So I don't have that great concern, but I do see, you know, that we've talked about in our working groups that yes, there's going to be a need for our educational systems to develop those kinds of workers to be able to make application to these technologies. So with that, thanks, sir.
Thank you. Heather, and then Michael.
Just to share an example, in talking with a Nevada cattle rancher in the last couple days, they were experimenting with the new virtual fencing product on the grazing front. And Shrikala, maybe you've seen this in Montana already, but it was interesting. In order to make that work, just on one ranch, they had to install 3 towers at a minimum. So it's not like you can just plug and play a lot of this, and it just underscores the whole connectivity piece. I think that Ryan also tried to illustrate and emphasize, and you'll be hearing more in Chapter 2 of this meeting.
Mike Gomes?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate your presentation. Can you touch on for the group a minute how See and Spray or autonomy are related to 5G and elements of connectivity and networks?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with See and Spray. So the way See and Spray works is that it is all on-machine edge compute. And so from actually executing the job, all of the intelligence is fully on the equipment. However, it works in an ecosystem of operations center where we have work plans and said, okay, hey, I want to go spray this field, and what's my product, what's my rate for that field. Once I go through the field, I create a weed map, a weed pressure map, and how do I get that data back so that I can work with that and understand that in my context. So See and Spray really has you know, a connectivity input and then a connectivity output kind of a part of it. Autonomy is different, of where for autonomy really to work, you need a level of continuous connectivity, especially or when the system sees something that it doesn't recognize. So it also has all the onboard compute for safety and can operate without connectivity right up until it doesn't know what it sees. So it's a different model framing than automotive, where it needs to recognize everything and fully understand its context, because in automotive you can't stop. Whereas in agricultural, okay, we're going to train it to understand its surroundings, and as long as we call it in its happy place, it will continue to run. But once it sees an object that it doesn't know, well, that's when it will send a set of images back. They will be reviewed by humans to determine what the appropriate next step is. And so it's either, okay, it's stopped and the operator needs to go intervene, maybe move an object, or the operator wants to route around that object and have a maneuver in the field and leave that area, you know, undone, then that's fine. So that then relies on connectivity to really be productive. If there's not connectivity, you lose all kinds of productivity of you know, you start the piece of equipment, you drive away, it sees something, and then you got to drive back. And then it starts again, and then you leave, and it sees something, and you got to drive back. And you know, as I talked before, profitability, sustainability, and productivity, we've still got to have productivity. We can't bring solutions to the market that aren't as productive as what a grower would expect.
Dr. Adeline has a follow-up.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering, as you talk about autonomy, how does security through that device enter into the picture? If you can talk just in general. I understand you don't want to talk specifics, but.
Well, and Dr. Adeline, I'm not sure I'm the expert to talk specifics anyways, but we have a team of security experts that have gone through and designed every aspect of that system to operate and maintain a safe system with the proper fallbacks on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Andy?
Thank you for the presentation, Ryan. A question that I know you're thinking about with regard to future propulsion systems and a move away from diesel propulsion, where those of us that have farms have tanks on the back of our pickup trucks and are constantly pumping diesel fuel in. How does autonomy factor into that equation for a future electric tractor that needs to recharge every so many hours and go to a central recharging station?
I turned it off, sorry. So we think it makes a lot of sense, particularly in the smaller horsepower segments. So as you're down below, let's say to the 100 to 150 horsepower range, that you can get enough work done between charging times that you maintain productivity in that environment. As you move up into the larger horsepower segments, I think large tractors like you saw, it really becomes more of a play of renewable diesel or alternative energy fuels besides battery electric in that space. There might be some applications where it could be a hybrid type solution, and we certainly have electric drives and electric component technology that can drive efficiencies and increased levels of precision and control in the large ag space. And so those are the ones that we will see first, and then as technology evolves, you know, continue to revisit it over time.
I don't see any other questions. I have one last comment, and I would love to get your thoughts, Ryan, on this. So, you know, obviously, even the story you shared of the tractor going under the hill and then not coming back, you know, that's sort of initial pains. Eventually, that will get better, and
Yep.
you're not tracking one piece of equipment, but you might be tracking multiple pieces of equipment at any given time, as well as I love the nighttime. I mean, you can get so much more work done because the limitation was the human before, right?
Yep.
So, but then this concept of a command center comes up. So whether it's at the farmhouse or whether it's some centralized place, maybe a John Deere dealer or something like that, where a command center is happening. So then the connectivity to those locations it's beyond what's available in the field. So any thoughts on kind of where that's going in the future?
Yeah, I think that thought progression is exactly what we talked about in our working group, and why we have, I think, the recommendation for speeds and bandwidth that we do, because it's not just about the piece of equipment. I mean, as a John Deere guy, we love it when it's about the piece of equipment sometimes, but it's not just about the piece of equipment, right? It is about where that mobile office is at. And as I talked about the thousands of decisions that a farmer makes in a day, they're out and about doing that, right? They're not just at a fixed mobile or a fixed farmhouse, dealership, wherever, making those decisions. They're out, boots on the ground, moving between the equipment, managing their operation, understanding what's going on. And so I think it's critical that that they're able to do that from everywhere.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate it. I think that kind of sets the tone for today. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that presentation. Love the videos. Those are awesome as usual. So so we'll bring this part of the meeting to a close, this chapter, and then moving on to the next piece, we're going to get into the review of the recommendations. So Tom, if we could pull up the PDF. So hopefully everybody got a chance to review the document that was sent last week that was sort of putting together all the different reports, the recommendations, et cetera. So if we just go to the table of contents, I'll kind of walk through the structure of it. The executive summary has an opening statement, and then from that it gets into the various recommendations from the 4 working groups, and so those have been summarized there. And then part 1 then gets into the report from the first working group, second working group, and et cetera, all the way get down to the appendix. And then in the appendix, a lot of the sort of extra material that was available that each of working groups had submitted has been put into the appendix, such as the members of the working group, maybe the charge for the working group, some extra graphs and explanations, et cetera. But there's an appendix for each of the working groups. So there's an appendix A for part 2, appendix B for part 3, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully all of you had a chance to look at that. This is not the final version. I'll just ask Tom quickly to flash the other tab up. So that one. So we'll have more pictures and it'll be more formatted, et cetera, right? So it'll be more fun. But this one, we have to really finalize the document before we can get to this spot. Actually, I have a working version of this, and someone told me, is this the final? And I said no, and they gave me a bad look because they're like, it's supposed to be the final. But I'm like, no, we got some more work to do. So what we'll do today is, if we can, and I'll share more of this over the break maybe. If we go back to the previous one, let's just go through the document. Like I said, we'll go through the recommendations. And then after we get through the recommendations, I'll let each working group chair talk about them. We can ask questions. We can have dialogue on it. If it gets to the spot where it gets to be a long time and we're spending time debating and discussing, then we'll kind of put it in a parking lot, and then after lunch we'll come back to it and then have a more discussion on that piece of it. So that will be it. And then the order in which we'll go will be, as you see it there, will be the mapping and analyzing connectivity, examining current and future needs, accelerating broadband deployment, and then encouraging adoption and availability of high quality jobs. So we'll start with the very first one. So if we go to the next paragraph down, there we go. So with that, Dr. Bajwa, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through the recommendations from this working group.
Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, our recommendations haven't changed since we met last time. But we are on a journey, right? We want every farm, every acre to have a connectivity so that autonomous tractor won't be stuck in somewhere in a depression or something like that. And we know that is where we want to go. And our group's charter was to figure out where we are now so we can chart that path, understanding what the connectivity is today, and it is changing every day. So we had two main emphasis areas we talked about. One is that many organizations or many federal agencies, state agencies are collecting data and they have different kinds of different things they are recording or collecting, and they're all working in different silos. So, one of the things we talked about was, the need for the agencies to work together. Let me quickly go into my. It's kind of hard to figure out. Give me 1 minute, please. So the need for federal agencies is to collaborate. That is one of our recommendations. But the other is so the need for coordination across all federal agencies. The other is that people are collecting different data, different methodologies, so some standardization. With that, we have made 5 recommendations in those areas. That's listed in the executive summary. The first recommendation is, in the 2 years we have been working on this, in the middle of the 2 years, the BDC first map came out, and we looked into whether our recommendations have been implemented in that map, and we very much appreciate FCC's work in. It is no trivial task. It is a huge lift, bringing that map into the public domain. But still, we looked into it, and still we felt that some of our recommendations need to be there. So this first recommendation is the usability of the map that FCC has. So we want it to be more usable or more friendly towards farmers who may want to access it, may want to use it. So the first part of that recommendation is that BDC maps should include additional lookup descriptors. I know Tom kind of came to our group and told that right now it is possible to look up a location by county. However, in some places it is parish, and some states it is borough. But the most important, if I were to go and look, most important for me is geolatitude and longitude or postal code. So we would like a few more descriptions that farmers or public can go and identify their land or their farm or ranch. Then wireless cover, second part of that is wireless coverage mapping. Right now, it's a hex 8 or what? I can't remember what it was. But in certain areas there may be more data available. So our recommendation is, if there are more data available, providing the ability to go into finer resolution. I think it is 25 acres right now. 25 acres is a large tract of land. So if we can go, Joy Sterling said she wants to be able to see each head of letters, right, or access each head of letters. So we are recommending that it could be finer resolution if data available. Farmers and ranchers could benefit from that. The other part is that today it is houses or commercial buildings that as structures you can identify. Farming operations, ranching operations have other structures. So to include agricultural structures like irrigation systems, grain bins, barns, water tanks, RTK towers, and things like that among the structures. That's our first recommendation. Second recommendation is about BDC verification data layer, and we were told that that is in the plans, and which we appreciate. But we would like to have independent verification data. There is this base map that BDC provides, but also on top of that, a data layer showing that this is verified. And here is what the verification data look like. And we would like to include third party, it could be data collected by state agencies or Native American nations or third party. And we also require, one of the things we learned is that different organizations collected data differently, but FCC coming up with a set of required key performance indicators, what exactly people need to be collecting. So it's all apples, not apples and oranges when you compare these data or combine these data. So we have some recommendations for what that KPI should be. Again, it's the same, network performance, provider network details, test location, active connection type, and things like that. Our third recommendation is a framework for defining served, unserved, underserved, and unverified lands. And we provide we kind of recommend a framework here. And we also recommend that FCC work in partnership with the USDA and adopt a framework, which could be what we recommend as described in our recommendation, and determine and map unserved, also called negative spaces, and underserved agriculture lands, and develop a visualization platform hosted by NAS, that is National Agriculture Statistics Service. They already have a cropland cover data. They already provide maps to farmers, and so that is a resource that the farmers trust and go to, and they have the ability to do that. And we recommend that NAS develop a platform and display the connectivity map over a base layer of cropland and pasture land data. NAS already has, it's part of their job to publish the cropland data layer. Pasture land data, there is USGS that has range data, but it may be something we can, or NAS can develop from that. And we have some recommendations for that what that framework should be, and we have 4 categories: unserved, unverified, underserved, and verified, and using different color codes for those categories. And you can find the details there. And right now we put 25 acres as a parcel size, so that is because I think that is what FCC's mobile map has, but if higher resolution is possible, that would be beneficial. And the fourth part is interagency cooperation. As I said, there are many agencies or private parties collecting data, but they are all working in their own silos. And I know FCC, and we heard that FCC has collaboration with the USDA and the NTIA. But we are recommending that, recommending FCC and the USDA to establish a council of federal agencies, including the 2 of them, but also Bureau of Indian Affairs, U.S. Census Bureau, and perhaps National Association of Counties and other state and native agencies who may have data. And and this council, we call it interagency council, report the progress in mapping and providing connectivity to agriculture lands to the Congress until the next Farm Bill. And we are hoping that would be in 2028, and Ryan here is saying 2030 we will have a fully autonomous farms. So the timing will work, right? And we are also, within USDA, there are multiple sub-agencies that are working in the connectivity mapping or providing connectivity. Rural development is, they have a grant program to provide connectivity. So we are also recommending that USDA coordinate within them. We call it an interagency task force to coordinate the data collection and all activities related to broadband connectivity within USDA. And part of this recommendation is also NAS, which is again National Agriculture Statistics Service. They do a farm computer usage and ownership survey every other year, if I remember correctly, and an agriculture census every 5 years. And we are requesting that, or we are recommending that those both the survey and the census be expanded to include connectivity information. They do a little bit right now, but not a lot, and use that as a part of the verification data layer. And FCC be provided with the funding, not FCC, I mean NAS be provided with the funding to do that. Our fifth recommendation is to adopt connectivity use case-driven standards for data and mapping purposes. We came up with 3 use cases. One is real-time heavy data processing use cases, where artificial intelligence is required. So that is whenever the farm equipment or tractor or machinery is in use, the data transfer need to happen. The second use case is real-time telematics data communication needs. Again, there the amount of data that needed to be transferred is small. And the third case is asynchronous bulk data transfer. I am sending out a drone and collecting data. I don't need to send that data real time back, but the drone may come back after day of operation, and in the evening or at night you can transfer that data. So those are the 3 use cases we have identified. That's pretty much our recommendations. I can take questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bajwa. Questions, comments for, Joy, go ahead.
Thank you for an excellent presentation, and also for the shout out on connectivity to the head of lettuce. I still stand by that. I'm interested in your just final comment right there about the data from the drone not necessarily needing that information immediately. And immediately I just thought, well, one instance where you might want it right away is if that drone has caught some sort of pest while you're harvesting, or something that it senses that is a pathogen, and you want to stop the harvest so that anything that's tainted or wrong with the crop doesn't get into the food chain. That I would not want to wait until I get to plug in.
So, Joey, that is covered in our first use case, real-time heavy data processing use cases. Another example I can think about coming from Montana is that you have a big snowstorm early in the season, and your cows are scattered everywhere, and you send a drum in. We have hundreds of thousands in acres of ranch. You want to send a drone out there. It's not easy for a person to drive around to figure out where those animals are, and you want that data to be coming back real time. So yes, that is covered, but there are also drone use cases where you don't need the data immediately. You're mapping your soil, or something else, which you are going to use next week or later. So both cases are covered. The first case would be real-time heavy data processing, where you need that data immediately. Third would be a case where you can wait.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
So thank you, and thank you so much for the report. I just had a couple of questions. I was really interested in recommendation 1 and the addition of structures to the BDC map, just because I'm a former FCC employee, so I also know, is how are you proposing to have those added? Is it something that the farmers will add, or is there something else? I'm just afraid that there's not a good place where people could just publicly get that information, and it could change, not super frequently, but some. And then just a quick question on the second recommendation. You talk about third-party data sources, and I was wondering if that includes crowdsourcing. So those were my 2 questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, the first question, again, clarify, are you talking about the security of that data, putting it in the public domain, or adding that data into the map?
Actually getting the data to put into it. Who's doing that? That just it seems like very important data. I'm not arguing with that. It's just how do you collect it? And I just don't know that the FCC has that capability.
My understanding is that we had some presenters both from FCC and the company that is doing the location fabric. My understanding is that it is possible. It is a height-based algorithm. If your structure is higher than your ground, it is possible to identify those structures. However, it's not. I'm not sure about the reasoning, but it is not. I think more interest is in houses and commercial buildings at this point. But for farmers, it is important to know, important to identify and to say that my barn is here, not there, or whatever, and to have a connectivity to those. For example, irrigation. Today there is a technology you can turn on and off your irrigation from your cell phone, irrigation system from your cell phone, and if there is something wrong there, they can see that and go and fix. So it's important to have those structures in the map. Yeah. The second question, tell me again, please.
Just in your second recommendation on the third line, or the last line, you talk about third-party data sources, and I wonder if that included crowdsourcing as well.
So we haven't included crowdsourcing, well, maybe there is some crowdsourcing. For example, one of our members were from UCLA, and it's a crowdsourced data, but they have some way to verify it. Again, I am not an expert in this. I wish Luke was here, but this is information from both NAS, our USDA liaison, and UCLA person, that if you have a sufficient data, you can drive drive some verification. Everybody has, this is the minimum connectivity everybody is reporting, or things like that. So it is based on crowdsourced. Yes, I would say, yep.
Heather?
Shrikala, on the comment related to the hexagons and wireless mapping, can you describe the working group's process to say at least down to about approximately 100 meters?
Yeah.
Versus 1 meter?
Yeah, the discussion was about the cost, basically. If you cost of getting connectivity to that finer level, I don't know what FCC has as a cost of the current BDC map, that hexagon level. So we thought it would be that 100 meter is a kind of a next step. Yeah, I know head of letters is there. We thought about it, but it is the expert in our group felt that is going to be cost prohibitive, and 100 meter would be a good trade-off. Yeah, and 100 meter. 100 meter. I don't want to comment more than that.
Other questions? Jimmy?
Dr. Bajwa, when talking about the mapping and specifically the other structures, I know with the FCC's current mapping is based on that last mile network, so what the ISPs are reaching and such. It's a little different on the wireless side of things, but One of the things we probably want to emphasize is that last acre network and connectivity, which is so important when you start talking about the outbuildings and reaching out beyond that farm and ranch headquarters where the ISP is providing service to. So just one thought there. In relation to the comment about crowdsourcing for data, we have to be careful on how accurate that can be. Just from somebody who does provide those kind of services on the last mile, the devices at the location doing the testing could be part of what's causing some of the challenges.
Yeah.
It could be outside of that network, and it could be even where a testing server is at. So I think as we look at those third-party ways of determining connectivity, we have to take that into consideration.
Thank you, Jimmy. That was discussed quite a bit. So if it is sparse data, it is, from what I understood, it is harder to derive. It's any kind of accuracy, but if there is sufficient amount of data using different devices, it is possible to draw some numbers. That is what I understand. And then your first comment, we felt that yes, broadband could come to buildings, barns or farmhouses or agriculture processing centers, but the field agriculture, like autonomous tractor and things like that, is going to be largely a wireless mobile kind of operation. You have another comment. You were going to say something.
No, I was going to say I love the verified and unverified, because that's really going to be able to show whether or not something is actually there on the ground, and that's very important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Andy?
So I have a futuristic question for you. And this ties to some of the things I think about for whoever ends up in the next term of this task force, because I think there are a lot of things that needs more thought. So farms typically have a farm number, then that's how they're registered with the USDA. And so can we get to a place in time where I can go to a database and I can input my farm number, and that farm number, because of the data that USDA has, automatically has the boundaries of my operation in its knowledge base, and I can look and see where I'm going to have coverage or not, and whether Ryan's John Deere autonomous tractor is going to get stuck or not. How do we make that happen? How do we get to that point where we have the linkage between these disparate databases of farm and agronomic operations and crop insurance operations and the data connectivity? This is where I think we need to go.
Andy, you made that comment last time we met, and I took it back to our working group. And what I heard from USDA NAS is that is a confidential piece of information, because a lot of the personal details, your insurance, that is what the Farm Service Agency uses. Those are tied to that section number or whatever section code or that farm number you're referring to. It somehow came into the public domain at one point in the past, but we were told that it's a federal confidentiality violation to use that number.
I'm not suggesting this be publicly available. I'm suggesting if I'm a farmer and I participate in USDA programs, I should be able to input my farm number and have the information be still private to me and be able to use that as a tool to look at the coverage across my agricultural lands.
Well, I'll take it back and to see what our USDA liaison has to say, but my understanding is that it's a confidential piece of information within USDA. It may not be even available to FCC to use. I don't know, but I'll take it back and hear what NAS has to say.
But that's an intriguing question, though. If the Farm Service Agency could overlay the FCC's data, and even if you're in office, they could produce the report or send you a PDF, so it wouldn't necessarily require user direct access to that database. I mean, I'm always about what's the solution, right?
Yeah, that is probably because, BDC data is our public data, and that could be part of the farm insurance, or, that process.
Right,
Yeah,
they
I'll take
know
that
everything else about it.
recommendation back.
Okay, other questions or comments? I didn't hear anything that was any dissent or anything that needs to go on a parking lot item unless you correct me. However, there are a few things that you could take back and say, okay, for the next working group that's gonna look at this may be some things to
Yeah,
think
yeah.
about, right? So, everybody good with that?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bajwa, and thank you to the working group that I know spent an enormous amount of time looking at this information. So with that, let's move on to the next working group, so examining current and future connectivity demand. And Heather, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, and it's a joy to have worked with such a great team in this round. Of course, first round was a great team as well, but I'm also relieved that several of them are in the room. So thank you, George, Joy, Andy, Ryan, for being here today. So hopefully you can shore up any comments. If I accidentally omit something, I trust and know you will make me toe the line. And I think in general we need to open by saying that our overarching themes ultimately come down to connecting not only to the terminus point and fixed locations like we think of traditionally as a farm decision-making headquarters, but to that seed of lettuce, to the palm of the farmer and the operator's hands, recognizing that there are multiple decision makers, multiple people in any given farming situation and growing situation, and also recognizing that the connectivity absolutely must support as robust upload as it does download, because we have data that we are generating and we need to understand and we need to be able to work with. It's so critical that we work across an ecosystem of technologies to make that happen. So if there's, I think, one takeaway, right, that we want to deliver, it is that it takes an ecosystem, symmetrical, far-reaching, to the last acre, to the last seed of lettuce, not only the head of lettuce, to be able to make this happen. And tracking where those decision makers are in the palm of their hand. So with that, you'll find on the draft of our report, pages 6 through 9, a summary of our recommendations, but I'd really encourage everybody to take some time to hop back to page 28, because that's where the real fun begins, and we have some illustrations, graphs, charts that really help break down what our recommendations, where they come from, and what they might look like on the ground. But I'll begin here on page 6. We look at number 1, essentially prioritizing deployment of our wired, wireless, and satellite infrastructure in agricultural lands. So if there are ways within existing programs to prioritize precision agriculture and reaching ag lands, rural America, that's what needs to be done. 2, farmers, encouraging them to band together to create private on-farm networks as a self-sufficient solution. We have a really nice example with Terra Nova Ranch in California in that page 28 section and beyond, and actually an appendix, just to illustrate how not only was it a private network, but it also then offered some public benefit as well. And they opened that up to users in the area, so it wasn't just about their farmland. Others can benefit from that. And naturally, cooperatives have a leading role in much of this throughout rural America. When we look at speed requirements, I opened with that comment of recognizing we need to be able to upload just as much as we need to download. So we are insistent upon the notion of symmetrical speed requirements. And to the last acre, we are recommending the 100 by 100, and then a minimum of 300 by 300 at the, I'm going to call them fixed locations, not necessarily, however that's delivered. Things like the traditional decision-making headquarters, whether it's the farmhouse or the shop, retail outlets, and so on. Our fourth recommendation looks a little more closely at spectrum, and that's why I encourage everybody to look back on page 28 and also in the appendices, because we had a few speakers really educate us on opportunities within spectrum. And in the past, we'd looked at CBRS as opportunities. Well, yes, there are some that exist there, but we're also looking at low, mid, and high, depending on the use case and where some opportunities could exist. So setting aside, and this may come up again in one of our recommendations, but we talked in terms of something like an ag band as well to be available for precision agriculture. We saw this established as FirstNet for emergency responders. Although it took years to establish that, now we think they've really done the hard work of how that works, so it could happen more quickly for us, right, George? To enable an ag band. In our fifth policy, you'll see they're amending the Reconnect program, which currently is geared for households, but incentivize applications that also benefit precision agriculture farm infrastructure. Let me just emphasize again that infrastructure is a range from fiber optic, fixed wireless, terrestrial systems, satellite. It's kind of all of the above to get it done, because it's all about connectivity and finding solutions. Number 6, improving rural utility service grants and loans for cell tower construction, and funding access to dark fiber could also work or help rural areas and the last acre connect more robustly. We, in number 7, we elaborate a little bit what we're saying there, considering the unique challenges of geography, profitability, operator aptitude, crop variety, labor, equipment, and support. When implementing technology solutions, one size does not fit all. The idea is that each farmer, each grower, each situation is truly unique. So it just underscores the need for the ecosystem. And also, as we continue to investigate the issue, to try to look at use cases that reflect those wide range of needs and where people are on their journey. Number 8, ensuring seamless connectivity by addressing cellular network limitations, including what we think of today as roaming agreements and antenna power level regulations. For example, we looked at wattage levels and what's regulated currently on equipment, and notions that if we could prove that that is removed from where the operator might sit, and especially as we look at autonomous vehicles, it seems like we could boost the wattage and therefore the signal on the equipment itself. So that may be a low-hanging fruit opportunity within the policy realm. We'd like to incentivize private cellular networks to meet high-speed connectivity requirements in agriculture. And just keep in mind, this also relates to enabling that and the fiber. All of it relates to enabling edge compute at the field level, at the farm level, and allowing us to process more data more quickly in our facilities and in our operations. We have talked about artificial intelligence as well. I was just looking for that in my comments. Yeah, thank you. It is in number 9, and needed to just turn the page, didn't I? I think that's a song. Is that Bob Seger? Turn the page. Jimmy, is that Bob Seger? So embracing emerging artificial intelligence techniques for multi-factor analysis in ag, and invest in training for accurate AI usage. That's something I'm sure Adoption and Jobs is looking at as well, as we talk about the workforce that we need, not tomorrow, but also today, helping us with some high-quality skills. But the true potential of this can only be unleashed when there's uninterrupted connectivity. We just keep coming back to this again and again, not just because it's our subgroup, because it is so real and so vital. I liked Mike Gomez's question about 5G, because I think most of us who are living and working in rural areas every day would say it still hasn't reached us. So to say that has been achieved is an untruth. It has not. And we're lucky to even get 3G. And those, especially I had a fellow task force member comment to me, you know, I was in Illinois recently, and I was lucky to get one bar wherever I went. No matter how smart the phone is, we have to be connected. On 10, we've talked about edge compute technology and private 5G systems to extend cloud capabilities to remote farm locations. Again, it's all about data, processing more and more. Ryan, did you just tell us on a 5,000-acre farm there's 750 million plants? All right, so that's just the plant itself, not the additional millions and billions of data points related to that one growing organism, and the soils and the microbes and the carbon and everything else related to it, right? And the emissions and the CO2 that it feeds upon for its plant food. So we have a lot of data that we need to be processing. So leveraging our edge compute technology and those 5G systems plays into this as well. On 11, again, we're just hammering home incentivizing private cellular networks to meet high-speed connectivity requirements. We think that the Farm Bill, at least from what I'm reading, it seems like there's interest on both sides of the House, both sides of the Hill, and within the committee to still move something this by December. And we think that the Farm Bill is really an opportunity to advance several of these recommendations through existing programs. So we want to all be hoping we pass this report and say, go team. We can provide it with as many decision makers as possible, as soon as possible. And as we talk about cellular connectivity, we tried to outline here in point 12 a number of factors, because really that is our, I say, most critical link in the chain when we talk about delivering data and enabling decision making in the palm of people's hands. And the fact that we have so much work to be done on that front. And FCC, we call upon you, I don't want to say beg you, but ask that you really call up some accountability in this area to require cellular companies to guarantee minimum download and upload speeds as part of the monthly contracted services, expand the mandate to provide service to everyone in a stated coverage area, similar to what cooperatives have to provide right now. Make everybody play by those rules. Design policy for farmers and ranchers to seamlessly access multiple carriers or merge with satellite coverage so that they can maximize efficiency and productivity in their fields. In many farm operations, they are spread across many different territories and geographies. It's not isolated to just wrapped around one barn or farmstead. So it's important to recognize that as a reality. Incentivizing modem and equipment development and articulation to capitalize on future dedicated ag spectrum that can communicate across cellular. Ensuring existing federal funds for infrastructure development and broadband can be used by states to create programs to help meet local needs. For example, Cell Towers Grant Program for local providers. We've seen that in the state of Missouri, for example. And that was a situation where service, when Spectrum was sold to nationwide carriers, and then they no longer serve the area. So we have that documented from some of our working group members, one in particular. And that the FCC continue developing and promoting consumer apps to ground truth provider services. Thank you so much. That has been a wonderful advancement, providing that ground truthing process and the entire data mapping process. It's just congratulations on that work, and we hope it continues to improve. So that's kind of a high-level summary of our comments, and I invite fellow working group members to please chime in if I did not emphasize things enough or articulate it well. Joy.
First of all, I think you articulated it beautifully. Thank you very much for representing. I'm thrilled to underscore, I think, one of the most powerful things that we have to say as a working group, which is our sense of urgency. And so we're thinking about this Farm Bill, not the next Farm Bill. And the needs that we're describing are for the here and now. The technology is evolving so fast. The amount of data that's coming at us as farmers is just a fire hose. And what a crying shame to have the ability to access that data and not be able to make sense of it is just too sad, particularly when the needs for savings, not just in money, but in our inputs is just so absolutely critical, and that our reporting responsibilities are growing incrementally every day as climate change crisis becomes more and more and more ominous and immediate. So I want to just underscore, I think you could hear it in the passion that Heather beautifully put forward, but urgency is really important. And then on a very personal level, my life has changed because I'm no longer interested in the head of lettuce. I'm interested in the lettuce seed.
Which is tiny.
So I'm even more, I am putting more precision into my precision.
And so I was just thinking about the 2 contracts I signed right before being gone to meetings this week for fertilizer. 28 was the product. And I was trying to do the math on that, where that added up to about $100,000. So if I take 60 of that and put it into that exact shot and keep it on that planter for a few years, we might be able to see a difference, see a payback. But, not everybody can make that quickly, and we're still not guaranteed that we'll be able to make that operate well and function on our existing equipment. But lots of opportunities, and we welcome questions. And again, other working group members, it's unusual for George not to chime in.
Thank you for the invitation, Heather, putting me on the spot. Again, first off, excellent summary, and I like that you took the group from the summary deeper into the body of the report. A couple of observations, and of course Ryan is with our group, but Ryan, I don't know if I'll quote you closely here. He said technology is unlocking things we don't know today. And so our group, as Heather is aware, tended to lean toward the art of the possible and tried to resist being drawn into the practical. Again, what Joy was emphasizing is the here and now and the immediacy. Drawing this together, we don't know what we don't know. We do know some of the things, and that is drawing us toward the immediacy, but the technology is unlocking things faster than we're aware. So we tried to stay away from the cost of mapping, the practical aspects of use cases, and tried to lean as much as we could toward the art of the possible, knowing that technology is unlocking things faster than we can imagine. So we did not feel like we were pushing the envelope by calling for 100 symmetrical. We honestly believe, from a technology perspective, that innovation will continue to come at a faster and faster and faster rate. And the long pole in that tent is connectivity, and that connectivity limitation is in speed and bandwidth. One last piece, or 5 or 10 more last pieces. This realization that on 5,000 acres there's 750 million plants, I thought was almost overwhelming, like goosebump overwhelming. That doesn't hold a candle, Heather, to what you pointed out and has been pointed out, that there are hundreds of data points per plant, and they change all the time, and we're not collecting that. If we have that, we can unleash unbelievable, unimaginable things we don't know by releasing that. So that was the last, except on what Andy had talked about earlier with the mapping for CLUs and the need for privacy. That the lack of automated information regarding the field boundaries is stifling innovation, dramatically stifling innovation. I'm not proposing any kind of a public release. I'm proposing a grower decision and a grower authorization of that release. And it needs to be done year in and year out because the crops change and the CLUs of what's being managed, what's in the operation, what's being owned change. So it is very, very, very important to automate the farm number or the land under management, under operation. It's really very critical because it's stifling innovation that is sitting there pent up in a bow wave, ready to offer solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Well put. Andy?
I didn't know this was going to be a round
You're
table
next.
thing.
Ryan's on deck. I don't know if anybody's in the hole.
So I can punch up a couple things here that I think are really very important, and at least one of them is a bit controversial, I know, and that is we really need to have a suite of communication capabilities available at the farm tractor because we know that equipment systems break. We know that there may be gaps in connectivity depending on the weather, or trees, et cetera, and so we've emphasized that there needs to be a capability for a system atop a tractor to connect to multiple companies, multiple topologies, maybe a mixture of satellite, 5G, et cetera. I think it's incredibly important, and that needs to be seamless for the farmer in order for that tractor not to get stuck, as Ryan illustrated earlier today. I think the other thing that we talked a lot about, and I think is actually a bit of a change in perspective across this whole working group, maybe even the task force, is that we need farmers to have more control over the technology that they're using, and so we've embraced the notion of private networks, either built by the farmer or built in conjunction with others, and that we think that should be part of the mixture as well. And some of that interest also sadly comes from the fact that there are areas that we don't have good service from existing legacy carriers, and we think, well, we're going to have to take the issue into our own hands in order to make sure that we can grow into a future precision ag and autonomous world. But we'd like to see that level of capability be on the same playing field as other techniques for communication across farmlands.
Ryan's like, I already spoke.
I don't have anything to add. I'm good, Heather. Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you, Teddy, Heather, and work group. Awesome job. I totally agree with your sense of urgency, and I appreciate each one of you talking about that. I want to clarify a few points in the recommendations because there are some farm bill initiatives that I worry some of this language might prohibit urgent adoption. Example, recommendation number 3 around symmetric speed requirements. Is that for government funding? Is that for just a precision ag standard? How did the work group look at that?
All of the above. And we say that there is precedent. Number 1 is the USDA Reconnect Build to Service standard is 100 over 100. And as we saw, the last 2 rounds were oversubscribed, so there's no hindrance there. Also, just this past spring, Treasury awarded $154 million under the American Rescue Plan Capital Projects Fund to support 100 over 100 for projects in California to be administered by the CPUC, our Public Utilities Commission. So these are standards that are already in play, so we don't see any reason to back off of that. And from a practical standpoint, in fact, there are wireless carriers that are offering that level of speed. So from a technological standpoint, it is feasible. Does that
Yeah, that
address?
certainly answers it. Certainly, it's capable to deliver. The last Acre Act, for example, is 150. So I think that's a pretty significant advancement for on-farm structures. So I just wanted clarity on that standard. Same topic, 300 by 300 at the farmhouse for fixed broadband service. Is that, I think, Heather, you mentioned that could be any type of technology delivering that. To me, I read fixed as maybe fiber. And that's the only comment there. And then finally, just wanted to ask if the work group would be okay updating number 6, grants and loans for cell tower construction. I think just tower construction. To build private networks, you don't necessarily need to build a cell tower to support that. Any type of vertical asset, RTK towers with power could suffice. So that's just a question I had for you.
Well, it sounds to me like these are constructive suggestions. The fixed wireless comment had come in exchange after we'd put together our initial report, and I guess I tend to read it the way you do. I think the idea is just get to 300 by 300. How you get there, you know, tech people, go be innovative. You can do it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Jennifer?
So thank you all, and thank you for the report and all your work on that. I want to go back to this 300 by 300 and 100 by 100. I'm a spectrum manager. I work on a wide range of spectrum technologies. You know, 100 by 100, 300 by 300 really isn't technologically feasible, nor will it be technologically feasible in the foreseeable future for wireless technologies with any scope, economic feasibility, or anything. And I will tell you, when we hear the word symmetry, we often think of it's a nice neutral sounding way of calling for fiber. And so it directly goes against your first recommendation that you're prioritizing the deployment of wired, wireless, satellite in agricultural lands, because you're directly proposing that the definition exclude those technologies. And while you're talking about future, I understand what was said by George. You're staying today to establish a symmetrical speed requirement. So I'm not saying maybe, I don't know how anyone's going to make more spectrum. They haven't figured it out yet, but maybe in the future someone will figure out how to reach that. Current applications today largely do not require symmetric speeds, and while it's growing, the actual use of networks it's questionable if it will ever approach symmetry for non-fiber networks. And so very concerned also that there's going to be places where you don't need it, but also where you can't get it. You can't get fiber in certain very, very remote areas because of geography and cost. I mean, we've seen that. I don't think the U.S. government, and I may be wrong, but I've been watching this Congress for a while now, I don't see them giving, $500 billion in money to deploy fiber everywhere. So I think this is unrealistic. I think it's not based on facts. I looked back at the report. There was one example given in the report for 300 with cows. They don't move very fast. Just saying. So this seemed to me to be a very unrealistic and unsupported recommendation, and I have serious concerns, and I'm happy to talk to you about it further, but at this point, I'd likely dissent from this recommendation. Thank you.
Sounds like that is a parking lot conversation opportunity for later in the day. And I would just respond that from a farm user standpoint right now, even when we have current standards of 25 by 3, it was only in the last year that I was able to get more than 1.5 up. And I get nowhere near 25 or down, nowhere near it. So even with, so I guess I respect the comment that there are some technological limitations and cost things, but I also think that there are some, I know, Joy, sometimes this word can cause us heartburn, but there's overbuild in areas where they're already served, and they're served very well. So it seems like targeting funds, directing funds to truly unserved areas and underserved areas is a large piece of this. That's just an opener.
Yeah, we can put this one in the parking lot item, because I think ultimately everybody's sort of saying the same thing. We just have to find the right language to put it into the document. I mean, we'll talk about it though, because I think it's not, ultimately getting more speed and getting closer to increasing the upload speeds is important, just as much as the download speeds. I think that's where we're going. And then based on the new technologies that are coming down the pipe, we want more bandwidth and more the ability to leverage them. So I think we just have to find a way in which we can structure this comment. So unless there's comments right now that we need to do it, I would rather put this on the parking lot item and we'll come back to it. Okay, Dr. Adeline, are you back? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Just a question for Heather. The discussion, and I heard Andy around private networks. I wonder if by increasing those, do we create a barrier so that everybody who wants to be in precision ag can be? And maybe I interpret the word private in a wrong fashion. So your thoughts?
Just, Andy probably has a much more articulate and in-depth response. I think my initial response is more about enabling it as one of many options, but not to corral everyone into that, and that's the only way we're going to reach rural areas. I don't think that's what we're saying. But what we're saying is we need to enable it and figure it out so that it can be a feasible option that is manageable on a small scale. Small scale meaning I'm not in the business to be a cellular provider, but I do need to be able to access a network to get what we need done to raise food. Andy?
I think there's some options here for private networks that go beyond just the individual farmer. We've had an incredibly successful model for cooperatives in agriculture for a long, long time. And so there's an opportunity for farmers to group together in a geographic area or by commodity, et cetera, to build networks that benefit them that otherwise might not be constructed. And so I think I would urge an awareness of that. And I will also say that I'm here, one of the reasons I'm here today is that I do think a lot about small farmers as well. And so the amount of technology that can be put into a small farm could actually be, that would not normally be available. Could be simple things like boosters and things like that that could be facilitated through microloans from USDA for precision agriculture. So I think we need to think a little bit more about the range of farmers who might be able to build private networks. It could be a really small 1 acre farmer all the way up to a whole township full of farmers working together.
And I would add, you also have retailers, you have other providers within the agriculture supply chain that would also be in a position, when you think about RTK towers and other assets, where they have a vested interest in the success as well. Joy?
I also wanted to hone in a little bit on the term private network, because one of the possibilities, particularly when you have a cooperative and it represents a geographic area, as our example of the Terra Nova Ranch, is that connectivity can be opened up to the surrounding community. And so what you're looking at is an expanded possibility of not just on the farm, which is of course our primary interest, but that it will spill over into the farming community and provide that service as well. So I think that is another way of looking at the importance of it.
Yeah, Jimmy, go ahead, and then Dr. Chicago.
So and I've got a question, but just responding to the private network thing. Generally, what's meant by the private network is is a network for private use, not necessarily one individual farm, Dr. Adeline, but it could be in a cooperative sense. We do risk getting into a cloudier situation if now you make it a ubiquitous community thing, but that's beyond the question of what we're talking about. The one thing I wanted to just mention when talking about upping the wattage at the towers, that needs to be evaluated more on a situational basis. The more rural you are, the more likely that's feasible than the closer you get to a more suburban area, right? Because if you up the wattage, that's pushing that signal out in a much greater distance, right? Which has the potential to cause noise for those who are using that same spectrum for other purposes in another area. So being able to manage that wattage is one way that it keeps that signal within the authorized use area. Again, when we're looking at last acre, very rural areas, it's probably not going to be an issue. But your idea of a dedicated farm band for spectrum, so that is the use for it, is a great way to keep that from being an issue.
Thank you.
My comment is about the private network. One of the things in our working group that we discussed is how do we incorporate private networks into our BDC map. At this point, we had no idea how to do it, so we did not address that. But if we are encouraging, and I know there are farmers who have private networks, but if we are encouraging more of the private networks or a cooperative structure, that is something we need to think about, how to include that in, or could there be a reporting requirement, and how to include it in a map.
Excellent comment. But again, back to Dr. Adeline's, the group wasn't recommending private at the exclusion of innovation. It was really about augmenting and accelerating the coverage to the last acre without putting an unfair burden on the commercial network operators. So that's where the focus was in really accelerating and augmenting without burdening commercial enterprise. The other piece to that was the reference to some type of commercial assistance for the public operators to deal with the very, very difficult economic challenges of providing public service where we have not developed or flushed out the use cases for industrial IoT, which we believe will be all, they'll manifest, they'll unfold, as Ryan talked about, as the technology moves forward. Again, we're trying to find the balance, help provide commercial service, and accelerate and augment with the option on private systems. Thank you.
I think I'd like to just follow up on the notion of managing how we map private networks, and it's a little bit of a snarky comment on my part, but this is another great example of linking this to the USDA existing systems where we have mapping of agriculture across America, and we could use those boundaries, and we would know that geographical information. So I think that kind of work with USDA, anything that we can do to increase USDA's use of electronic systems and data and allow that mapping to be better used by farmers rather than it just sitting in a filing cabinet in a USDA office will help this effort.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so this is what I have. So we have a parking lot item for recommendation number 3, which we'll have a discussion on that. There was a recommendation, request to modify recommendation number 6 to make it a little more generic, I think, right? So we'll take a look at that. Anything that we need to do on this private network, or are we okay with the way it reads now? We can put it on the parking lot if you want. Okay, not hearing any, so we'll take those 2 as parking lot items at the moment. Okay. So it's almost noon, so per agenda, we have to sort of break for lunch now. So let's do this. We break for lunch. We'll come back at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and then we'll continue with accelerating broadband deployment and the adoption working groups. And then from that, we'll finish up the rest of it. So thank you, everyone. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, everybody had a good lunch. I know we enjoyed some company here as well. So we'll continue with the agenda from earlier. So we have 2 more sets of recommendations to review from the remaining 2 task forces, and then we will get to our parking lot items, review a few things, and then we'll proceed to a vote. So with that, we'll get to the accelerating broadband development. And Tom, I don't know if we're able to put the recommendations on the screen, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer for an overview of the recommendations from this working group. Thanks, Jennifer.
So thank you so much, and I hope I can keep everyone awake after lunch. And I think we had some good discussions over lunch, so we appreciate that. And before I start, I want to thank everyone in my working group, including my co-chair, who came in the middle being my co-chair, Jimmy Todd. And we're very pleased to present our recommendations. Our task force spent a lot of time and effort, and I don't think you'll see much change from the last time around, Teddy. Just some refinements, but I think we were pretty in line last time. So first issue was definition. One of the concerns we had was that different federal agencies have different broadband definitions and standards for funding decisions. And one thing we're hoping that there could be a uniform definition across the U.S. government, and that this could be looked at every 2 years or so. We think that's an important consideration across the agencies and would just make things clearer and easier for everyone. Our second recommendation was prioritizing grant applications that include wide area coverage to agricultural acreage, including to the farm, office, or house. We really think it's critical that this criteria be looked at to ensure robust broadband being deployed to the last mile network, but also as the wide area, which we really require for our agricultural lands. And that's for all technologies, of course. The third item we talked about was the need to have interoperability as part of conditions for funding to ensure that networks and equipment that's used meet the standards that are out there, and we want to make sure that they work across networks, across farms, and so forth, so we can obtain economies of scale, not just in the communications, but in the end user devices. So this was one we felt was a good one to highlight. 4, we also thought, as FCC and USDA are looking at incentives for connectivity, they really need to focus onto rural agricultural land headquarters. And we're really, we were talking about this at lunch, some of us, the $42.5 billion that was authorized for NTIA's BEAD program is fantastic for build out of broadband networks, but we really do think there needs to be an additional incentive for applicants that can and will build out broadband networks to reach the farm and ranch headquarters. That's something that's not available today. And that would be both from BEAD, other funding, USDA funding for Reconnect, and the like. 5 is making available spectrum that's available for dedicated that's made available for precision agriculture use at a low cost. And we weren't really able to say exactly what that would be, but we do think, especially for private wireless networks, that's really important. And this will help with the establishment and manufacture of specific equipment and systems that are tied to meet the needs of the agricultural community. 6, USDA, and this is a fairly long one, should provide funding for build-out and operation of last acre networks to ensure the capability to use precision ag systems and devices. And we identified 3 different areas we thought this was critical. in terms of a funding mechanism for the individual farmer is one, grant funding opportunities through local FSA or NRCS offices. Two, grant funding opportunities through qualified ag co-ops. And this means qualified, we're talking about those co-ops that are willing and capable of administering grants. And then last but not least, providing flexibility for whichever option suits a particular farming community that USDA is looking to serve. 7, we want the FCC to continue to make incentives available to encourage precision agriculture deployment. And we saw the FCC start this in their enhanced competition docket, and we were very pleased about that. And we would ask the FCC to continue to look and explore methods in which to incentivize further use of spectrum for agricultural lands. And one of the areas we highlighted was the use of bidding credits or other financial benefits for service providers who, as part of their auction bids, commit to the deployment of broadband to unserved agricultural lands within a set time frame. We feel by really pulling this out and giving direct incentives, we can help solve some of the problems we've been seeing in getting people out there and to deploy to agricultural lands. Switching a little bit to up above was the FCC a few years ago changed its NGSO, non-geostationary orbit satellite system requirements to allow less than full nationwide coverage. We think this should be relooked at because of the need for broadband throughout the country, including in the most rural areas of the country. So we just recommend that the FCC take another look at it through its Space Bureau. 9, the FCC should implement geographic build-out requirements for spectrum-based licenses, and it should be used as a metric for funding to ensure coverage of unserved agricultural lands on a timely basis. And this really kind of gets tied with some of the other things, because we think there needs to be regulatory incentives to force the build-out, or maybe not force is a bad word, encourage the build-out to rural lands. And one of the areas the FCC has used in the past is geographic build-out requirements. And so we thought this was something they should revisit. And perhaps even look at shorter and more aggressive build-out timelines as a consideration for winning bids. Maybe you don't just do this based on money, but you look at other considerations as you're doing your auctions. So a thought there. 10, the FCC should strengthen policies that require auction biddings to show the long-term sustainability and scalability of their proposed networks, recognizing the need to raise the bar significantly on upload and download speeds. And this is something we were talking about actually at lunch, was you really need to have a long-term solution. So it's great you give money to people and they build out the network, but if it's not economically sustainable for a number of years, it doesn't do anyone any good. So that was the thinking behind this recommendation. 11, the FCC and USDA should work with stakeholders to build a playbook for creating and operating rural community-based nonprofit solutions. This is modeled after an existing playbook that NTIA has. And this will allow entities to leverage the expertise of local independent existing operators to build community-based high-speed networks, which we talked a little bit about before in some of the other recommendations. And also can establish public-private partnerships, which we think is really, really important. 12, zoning issues. I don't think we've talked much about this today, but the FCC, working with states and localities, should address zoning issues to ease regulatory and administrative burdens associated with deploying broadband networks, whether it's laying cable, setting towers, or establishing satellite base stations, or whatever other deployment of equipment needs. It's something that I think all of us have who are service providers have had some burdens, and this should be a focus. And then last but not least, I don't want to say we're ending on unlucky 13, but number 13 is in tribal areas, states and localities should work with tribal authorities to help speed deployment. It's important here that states work to avoid imposing duplicate or heavy burdens on the deployment of broadbands to farms and ranches in these tribal lands, something that we have heard about through our speakers and our discussions that some have faced, so something we wanted to highlight. And with that, maybe I'll turn over. I don't know if Jimmy has anything to add. Thank you.
I do not have anything to add, but I will say it's been a great work, a continuation of what we put out in 2021, and I think this continues to keep the focus on a lot of things that are very similar, important, and we want to see hopefully that this not only is accepted but implemented.
Thank you, Jennifer and Jimmy. Questions for the working group? Andy?
I guess I'll ask Jimmy this question because it came up before lunch. The bullet point 11 is an alignment of a little bit of a conversation we had about sort of community-based private wireless networks, and I think you'd expressed that there's some reservation that we have some policies or regulations that would be challenging. I would be curious for like an elevator speech on what those were.
So I guess the comment I made was more in relationship to the fact if you've got a service provider that's providing service to a community, then you provide a private network that is used outside of your private use for your business or such, then that becomes a challenge for those of us who are service providers, right? So we're selling it a service or a connection to you at your home or your business for your use. But if you start spreading that beyond that personal use for what you're paying for, now you're getting into a different type of service. When we talk about private networks for ag use, what we're talking about, even if it's not isolated to a farm, but it's multiple farms, it's for that ag purpose. It's not for, providing the general ISP type usage. So those are the things that I just think might become a bit of a conflict if it's used more broadly than for the purposes of that last acre network.
Other questions? Heather?
Yes, in one of your recommendations, and I apologize, I don't remember which number it was, but you used the phrase "as a condition of receiving the grant funds." Could we scroll back up to that? It may have been 3 or 4. And I just wanted to get clarity on that. That we interoperability standards as part of the funding process. It was in your verbal remarks. You said as a condition for receiving funds. Just wondered if you could elaborate on that. If you're saying that they would have to show proof of, like we've used the phrase, an ecosystem of network to reach the final destination, or are we saying we want to encourage joint applications between companies that might provide different types of technologies, or
So
was that intended?
Thank you, and I don't think it was a condition, it was actually required not to show ahead of time, but as you're using the money, that you should use standard-based solutions. What we didn't want to have was solutions that couldn't be upgraded over time. And so the idea was if you worked with, and sometimes there won't be standards, right? I mean, not everything. I look at my friend from John Deere. Sometimes there won't be standards in place, but where there are standards, we wanted to ensure that we were looking at standards-based solutions, and that's kind of in line with the government's been doing generally. So we wanted to make sure it comes down to precision ag as well. On communications, not at the...
In the application part.
Exactly.
And I apologize. I think my reading didn't keep up with my listening on that. So thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yep, Andy, one more time.
I guess I'm going to propose a parking lot topic, and I think it's something I really never thought of until Jimmy's comments just now, and that is when we think about enabling agricultural producers to work either individually or together to provide private networks, are we saying that those can only be just for agricultural operations? Or is that a limitation that we've agreed to? Because so much of what we've said over the last couple of years has been that as we build agricultural capacity through additional broadband across America, we are also lifting up other services in rural America like education and healthcare and things like that. And so I think maybe we need a little specificity. I thank Jimmy for raising that issue.
This is where on the first iteration of the task force, right, we defined last mile and last acre networks, because that last mile is getting connectivity to every home, every farm, every individual in those rural areas. If we meet that mandate of reaching everyone at the last mile, then they have that connectivity, right? The last acre network is a different network. It's to reach that last, acre that is beyond what that service provider is bringing to the home or the business, right? So that's where the conversations about using private networks for the benefit of the last acre came into discussion. And I think you've seen that both in an industrial situation where some folks that have these very large manufacturing facilities will use a private wireless network, private LTE, private 5G, and it's within that business. But that last mile is what connects them to the internet cloud, right? And that's where we need to make sure that the last mile connectivity is there for every American. And then for precision ag, we have to have that ubiquitous last acre coverage, which allows us to truly harness the capabilities of a precision ag. Hopefully that was a little more clarification.
Perfect.
Maybe I can just add to it because you had picked on recommendation 11. If you look at the final sentence, we say by providing direction, the FCC and USDA can establish guidelines that help public-private partnerships that are most likely necessary to accomplish successful builds in areas currently unserved by a local service provider. So we were never visiting, we've always seen that when you build out for ag, you'll also pick up unserved, people in those areas. So I think what Jimmy Todd's 100% correct is it's capturing both the unserved lands and the unserved people, and schools and libraries, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, can you, do you know which one? Jennifer, do you remember what was the geographic coverage recommendation? Is it number 9? Oh, yeah, number 9.
It's 9?
9, yep. Do you have a question?
But the one I was talking from was 11, so.
Yep. Dr. Bajo, do you have a question?
I have a comment about the last number 13 recommendation. Our working group brought some speakers from tribal areas to listen to their constraints, and it was very apparent that the additional burdens placed by BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, increased the cost of deployment by 20% or more. So that statement about states and localities should work with the tribal authorities. I'm not sure who you intended, but it would be good to state BIA specifically.
Okay. Okay. Other questions, comments? All right, so I think we have 2 items kind of coming out of this one. One is I put the parking lot item on private networks. We'll have that discussion at the end. I'm not sure what impact our output at the moment, but we can certainly have a discussion on that. And then recommendation number 13 to include BIA in there. Okay, not seeing any other hands up, virtually or in person. So thank you so much, Jennifer and Jimmy, for walking through this. So let's move on to the last working group, but not least, encouraging adoption and availability of high-quality jobs. So with that, Julie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd like to thank the task force members here that are on our working group, Dale Artho, Mike Gomes, Bob Hans, I believe, and also our work group members who spent an incredible amount of time and effort and expertise to get us here, many of which have been with us for 4 straight years. So I'm happy to be here today and proud of what we're putting forward. Our work group really focused on national security, maintaining U.S.'s leadership in the world to maintain geopolitical stability. We did that by focusing our recommendations on some key topics, starting with on-farm connectivity, climate-smart agriculture and sustainable productivity, improving collaboration, research, and innovation, assuring long-term continuity of U.S. agricultural systems, solidifying cybersecurity and data privacy requirements, and finally, assuring multi-scale adaptability for our producers and ag ecosystems. I will have to say, please hang with me. We have about 35 recommendations, but they're pretty short. First, USDA and the FCC should consider precision agriculture connectivity as a critical component of our nation's food and homeland security. Number 2, USDA Reconnect should pivot to prioritizing on-farm connectivity as exemplified by Senate Bill S 2542, or the Last Acre Act. And as of last week, House Companion Bill HR 6142. That will need to be added to the report. I apologize. That dropped, I think, last Wednesday. Number 3, the USDA should focus eligibility and awards on climate-smart outcomes rather than specific practices or solutions. 4, the USDA should increase funding available to producers through Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. 5, the USDA Conservation Program should incentivize practices that have multiple environmental benefits. For example, improved water use efficiency may also improve water quality due to less runoff. Optimal use of nitrogen reduces life cycle energy for crop production, but also can improve water quality, for example. 6, the USDA should allow all new smart irrigation systems to be funded under EQIP. Currently, only systems that have been deployed for 2 years can apply for upgrades. Number 7, USDA Risk Management Agency should include in crop insurance precision ag premium reduction. When farmers utilize precision agriculture equipment and data management, they lower their operational risk profile through automation in each cropping year and establish crop records that create sustainable long-term value of historic practice data. Reductions in premiums to reflect those lower risks would encourage farmers to adopt precision agriculture technologies that often also conserve natural resources. Crop insurance should reflect the influence of improved accuracy of field size and climate conservation practices on actual production history needs, careful consideration, particularly during transition years. The use of actual as-planted maps can both reduce premiums and improve accuracy with improved measurement and reporting of active farmable land. Number 9, USDA Farm Service Agency Precision Ag Loan Guarantee should work with traditional farm lenders and with their own lending arm to guarantee loans for producers to purchase direct cost and labor-reducing precision agriculture equipment and services, recognizing them as best management practices. Number 10, using less energy through improved efficiency via better lighting, insulation, equipment maintenance should be rewarded similarly to the generation of renewable energy. The agricultural landscape offers opportunities to generate renewable energy via digester, solar, wind, geothermal systems, and these can all improve the economic resilience of farms. 11, USDA programs should empower farmers to use the hardware and software systems that improve machinery efficiencies or reduce passes over the field. 12, USDA should continue the RCPP program, or Regional Conservation Partnership Program, to enhance collaboration between universities, stakeholders, and public-private partnerships. Greater clarity, however, regarding the use of the funds towards enabling technology could lead to more adoption and would lightening the match requirement. 13, conservation payments, USDA FSA, Precision Ag Environment Payment, and the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and RCP program. As highlighted throughout the 2018 Farm Bill, precision agriculture and precision agriculture technologies are recognized as critical to conservation, productivity, and profitability. Therefore, precision ag technologies and practices should be recognized as best management practices, and direct payments for its utilization should be established. USDA should consider a voluntary program such as establishing and growing Climate Solutions Act that includes carbon credits, nitrogen optimization, and water use efficiency. I will highlight voluntary on that recommendation. Number 15, USDA or other relevant federal agencies should dedicate increased funding to promote adoption of cover crops, reduce tillage, and other practices that promote soil organic matter that brings many benefits in the utilization of nutrients. 16, USDA should increase marketing and education programs across agencies to promote the value of precision ag technologies and agriculture's benefits to the United States. 17, the NRCS should consider nationwide on-staff technologists and precision agricultural specialists. 18, USDA operating loans should be increased as a means to allow for ag tech adoption to mitigate operational risk and prepare for climate adaptability tools. 19, USDA should implement department and agency-wide interoperability and symmetry of internal program formats to utilize operator-driven data for future operator mandatory reporting, farm program creation, and cohesive agency interaction of that data. 20, state broadband coordinators supported by NTIA should partner with land-grant university system, extension service, non-land grant regional colleges and community colleges to develop digital literacy training to support the adoption of precision ag tools. 21, in partnership with DoD, DHS, NSF, the USDA should establish a biosecurity, cybersecurity research and innovation facility through the land-grant university system. 22, USDA study on technology adoption benefits to the productivity and profitability to ensure food and water security. 23, land-grant university systems must be fully funded and hiring qualifications must prioritize technology know-how and on-farm adoption assistance. 24, increase national collaboration between USDA and RCS and land-grant university systems concerning as-applied research, technology use, and training. 25, CTE and community college precision agriculture curricula should be developed to support a system of systems approach. A developmental framework should be created with state NRCS offices, land-grant universities extensions, and local economic development agencies or county commissioners. 26, all systems need to contain the architectural element of a layered security strategy as a means of defensible architecture. 27, due to the sensitive nature of farm record data and the potential for vulnerability, all systems should have the requirement of multi-factor authentication. 28, industry should adopt NIST 800-53 presented herein. This is actually a subset that the work group put forward for adoption. We tried to find the balance of not setting the industry back as far as current precision ag adoption and prioritize the NIST standards we felt were applicable to precision ag networks and technology. 29, states should adopt a template similar to Nebraska's LB 63, withholding state USF funding from any telcos using equipment that's on the FCC covered list. 30, agricultural data privacy standards should be considered a matter of homeland security and as such should be prioritized by state and federal agencies. 31, national focus supported by agricultural associations, land-grant universities, industry, and the USDA should be placed on data privacy awareness, education, and outreach. 32, data privacy standards should include but not be limited to the following. A, producer-owned data or customer-generated data should be the requirement. B, data must be retrievable in its raw form without manipulation in real time. C, right to access and delete personal data or farm record data. D, right to opt out of sale or further use of data. E, aggregate statistics utilizing producer-generated data must not be shared or sold to third parties without written consent. And F, all right, title, and interests are owned by the producer or customer and may not be replicated, sold, or manipulated. 33, the FCC, NTIA, and USDA should include consistent reporting metrics and surveys to identify broadband deployment and precision agriculture adoption. 34, USDA should leverage a consistent survey across departments regarding broadband use, affordability metrics, and precision agriculture use. And 35, data should be made public on a national broadband map and the deployment locations map created in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That excerpt was actually taken from the Last Acre Act. I have one addition, sorry everyone. In our report, you will also see a recommendation that Congress should adopt the Precision Ag Loan Act, which is S719, establishing a department of USDA to administer low-interest loans to producers and ranchers for precision agriculture. I just want to call attention to that as it is in the body of our report, but after hearing the other recommendations here, I think that directly ties to some of the things we've been talking about, so I wanted to get that in front of the task force. That's it.
What was the bill number on the?
It is S719, the Precision Ag Loan Act.
Julie, do you think we need to include that in these recommendations, or are you good where it is right now?
Teddy, I think we might want to look at it. The reason being with the conversation around private networks, from my understanding of that bill, producers can use that for boosters, modems, et cetera. And also for us, it's one of our recommendations for affordability.
Okay, so we'll add it as a number 36, maybe. Is that okay?
Thank you. Sorry.
No, I'm just making sure we get it. So. Go ahead.
Well, do you think, does it require an actual new agency, or could it be handled under RMS or FSA with existing loan portfolios?
Good question.
Maybe.
I believe the way the bill's written, it instructs USDA to administer this through a separate entity, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Any questions, comments for Julie? Joy, go ahead.
Thank you. A number of us have referred to the Last Acre Act, and Jennifer actually pointed out a discrepancy. I believe the Last Acre Act does have specific speed recommendations, and so perhaps we want to modify our support of that bill to indicate that we're interested in higher speed levels than are recommended in the act.
Or clarify the components of the act that we are supporting. I mean, basically, it's about concepts, isn't it? And how we can advance those.
I think that that's an excellent recommendation. What we love about that is what it's called, which is to bring connectivity to the last acre.
Yeah, with Last Acre, I would keep in mind as an industry to push this forward, the speeds were taken into account strategically to get it moved forward. So because it does prioritize getting pretty high band connectivity to the Last Acre, our work group was certainly supportive. That said, there are components of the bill that prioritize how the network performs, which I personally feel is more important. So you have a producer partner and a telco provider who work together to say, okay, what precision ag tools are you adopting and what's your roadmap over the next several years? That network then will be scored on how well it supports the producer's operation. And I think that's an amazing part of Last Acre, where my fear with many current policies and funding mechanisms today, doesn't take into account the precision ag tools that the producer is leveraging. So we could talk about latency, handoff, all of those things. I think Last Acre does a really good job identifying that, specifically around automation.
Okay. We're gonna rewrite we're gonna review the two recommendations, so we'll see if the change is needed to this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Joy. Other questions or comments? Andy?
That's good, thank you. I have a couple comments here. On the Last Acre Act, I think I have some problems with certain elements of it. I don't know that we want to litigate the Last Acre Act in this meeting, but we could put it in the parking lot because there's some things in there, particularly with regard to small farmers' eligibility, that trouble me. So I guess maybe I just asked to have a further discussion on that. And then the next topic, I'd look for some clarification on bullet point 3, which talks about eligibility and awards on climate-smart outcomes rather than specific practices or solutions. Can you put a little bit more meat on the bone on that? Because this is an area that I think about a lot, because there are still varying opinions on climate change and what's acceptable practices and who gets paid for them. And some farmers have been doing them for a long time, and some farmers are not. And so it's a contentious perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. I think a really perfect example of that would be where the USDA prescribes certain technologies, like a soil moisture probe and a rain bucket within 1 mile of each other. Well, that's the technology that exists today, but is not the technology that might exist tomorrow. Now there's new technologies every day that might incentivize more efficient irrigation that doesn't include a rain bucket or soil moisture probe, for example. So what we're asking for is just a shift in the mentality of allowing the producer to choose the technology that's best for them rather than apply. Another example would be specific types of biochar or soil amendments are covered when other probiotics for the soil are not. And I think inherently that policy disincentivizes some producers from adopting those practices.
Perfect. Great answer. Okay. My next question revolves around bullet point 32. And this is another area that I've thought a little bit about recently, particularly since I've been, I guess because of this task force, been studying artificial intelligence, and I'm studying it right now. As a matter of fact, I have coursework due. Have you considered the implications of artificial intelligence from the perspective of data aggregation from multiple farmers being used in large language models to provide recommendations to other groups of farmers? The way this is written, it would be really onerous or burdensome to use data from many different people, which is really what those large language models do, to provide insight to an individual farmer. Every farmer that had data input into the model would have to sign off on it.
Yes, we did. We talked a lot about the leveraging data lakes to improve agriculture, to improve machine learning tools, et cetera. I think I would still come back to Andy, is that the aggregate statistics still must be signed off with written consent to allow that data to go into those machine learning tools. I have a feeling Mike Gomes might have something to say about this, so I don't want to totally speak for him. But full disclosure, we didn't dive deeply into AI, machine learning, et cetera. We felt as a work group it was most important to start having a conversation around data privacy standards for agriculture as a whole. So my recommendation would be maybe the next charter can really focus on that, maybe leveraging this as a template. But Mike, any feedback there?
So Andy, the biggest thing we worked on there was the ability for producers to opt in to a pool, right? So that way they could have the ability to share. What we talked about was mostly B, in the fact that the data is retrievable in its original form, so that then you could take it to service provider B and then utilize it. And so that's really kind of what we had looked at. We had talked about the idea that if you try and retrieve derivative product once raw data goes in, it becomes too complicated. And so it's the idea that you can always get your raw data back out, but we didn't go too far down the AI version.
Okay, thank you.
Heather?
So a compliment, I really liked number 20, where you're recommending the state broadband coordinator develop digital literacy training, working across universities and colleges, things. And also wondered on related note, and maybe I missed it, was there also any discussion about WIOA boards, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act boards, and like local job training, identifying in rural areas, prioritizing digital literacy for ag tech?
Yes, actually twofold there. First, number 20, thank you for recognizing that, Heather. The goal was actually to do some cross training, if you will. So if the broadband director, coordinator, backed by the BEAD program, was in these rural communities and working with Extension, that would raise their awareness of agriculture, what farmers and ranchers need to be successful, and then inherently educate them on how these networks need to be there, right? So that was part of that one. We did and do include in the report some of the workforce training, CTE programs, et cetera. We actually had Idaho speak to us on their launch program, which I love. I think the work group was also really impressed, where the state is prioritizing careers in agriculture because it is such a massive industry, and giving these students out of high school $8,000 to go to a CTE program of their choice with really awesome results.
Other questions? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, on 32 B, do we need to add more definition around real time? Wondering if that can be interpreted different ways as maybe even the raw format of wondering, is this raw sensor format? Or a lot of times the raw sensor format is turned into geospatial representation of the data, and it's really like, okay, the customer wants the geospatial representation of it, not massive table with what was made, what made that documentation file, like an as applied map or an as planted map. I'm assuming that's what that means, not the raw sensor data. But wondering if we need to add clarification to that.
I would hold true on the raw sensor data. I think that's also valuable. Goal being that the producer can take that to another solution provider for another type of prescription service, or maybe to an agronomist where that raw data is valuable to them. The real-time side, I think we should and can add definition to that, right? It might not be you press a button and you get it today, in that second. I think the work group would certainly be open to defining the term around real-time.
If you want, we could add original to that raw original form, because that was really the spirit in which it was proposed.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I was thinking about that as you were talking of, we would need to say that of the data coming off board, because some of the data, much of the data stays on a piece of equipment and never comes off board. Just thinking through how we handle that, or if that's clear as well.
Right. Our original intent was the idea that if you put it in, you could get out what you put in. Yeah. Right. In many cases today, if people put something in, it might be translated or otherwise transformed, and they can't get back the original raw data in order to take it to service provider B. Yeah. And so all we said was, that's why all we said was you could have, if you have the ability to retrieve the original raw data without manipulation.
Yeah, I think that intent makes a lot of sense.
I could see changing that, Ryan, to must be retrievable in its original form, input form, something to that effect. Mike, do you agree with that?
I do. And if I mean, because maybe real time is confusing because it's the idea that you get the original data back out, right? And so it's less the time element that's the concerning piece there.
And that if you're trying to make a decision, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're trying to make a decision, we don't want this standard to allow for 3 months when you're in the middle of irrigation season or planting.
So what was the change we're gonna make there? Just
Data must be retrievable in its original form without manipulation in near real time.
Yeah, that fits. I mean, real time has some very specific implications that are a challenge to meet technically.
Yeah, and I think that's where there's enough industry probably understanding and precedent set with real time versus near real time that near real time is not 3 months, but it's also not,
That
down to the
second.
millisecond type of retrieval.
Thank you.
Dr. Adeline?
Julie, I was going to ask you, when you're talking about support for producers to get financial support with related to the technologies, is there any thought of identifying those? And let me give you an example. I did get a grant to produce a hoop house here on the place, but they define what that hoop house would have to be. So what do you envision, or is it going to be, because of the breadth of what we're talking about, there could be all kinds of technologies. How are we going to identify that for support?
It's a great point. I'm a firm believer that farmers and ranchers and rural communities are the best innovators, and that prescriptions shouldn't come from the top down. It should be from the bottom up. So that being said, I think that takes us back to focusing on the outcomes rather than prescribing the solution. And if the grants and the applications can quantify what those outcomes are by leveraging the particular solution, we'll be in much better shape for it.
Thank you. That's great.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question that the recommendations 3 through 5 talk about the USDA programs and outcomes. Is the idea behind those recommendations that these will result in more of precision ag adoption?
That's correct. And also, right now, I think, again, we prescribe certain technologies, and technology today is outpacing when we're going to look at the next Farm Bill in 5 years. So if we're not prescribing specific technology and we're allowing the producers through this next 5 years of a Farm Bill to choose what works for them, we'll accelerate precision ag adoption rather than trying to fit it into the narrow box that's called out today. An example of that would be irrigation sprinklers. In 2 years, you can update a system, but technology is changing much faster than that. And whether it's drip irrigation or it's center pivot irrigation, it really doesn't matter. Policy cannot keep up with the technology that's coming out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Michael Gomes, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick one. I just wanted to recognize both Julie and Mike McCormick for their 4 years of leadership of this working group. They've done a fantastic job. Julie's really worked at it very, very hard last time around as vice chair, this time around as chair, and I think that the work shows. And so to the committee members, we thank them for that. The other thing is that we work very hard as a committee to work with existing infrastructure and existing programs rather than create new stuff. And so that's where while we've got 34 plus different recommendations, we did that because we're working to work within the confines of the existing infrastructure. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Mike.
Great, thank you, Michael. Any other questions, comments? All right, so we have a few parking lot items and a few modifications to make. I think I've written them down. We'll certainly review them here in our next session. So with that, that brings us to a close on reviewing all our recommendations. So we'll take a break now, and then what we'll do is come back and look at the parking lot items we have, make the well, at least agree on the modifications we're gonna potentially undertake, and then maybe have a discussion on the last few parking lot items, and then move to a vote. So with that, it is now 2:25 p.m. Let's get back at 2:40 p.m. Eastern. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone from the break. Just moving on to the last portion of our agenda, or at least the meaty part of the last portion of the agenda. So what we want to do now is, obviously we've reviewed all the recommendations, good discussions, good dialogue, good comments. Really appreciated that. I think that, really kind of unifies our approach to this. We do have a few things that, we said we'd leave to the parking lot item, also a few things that have come in over the last few days of things we need to update in the document. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share, we won't change the document live because that would get a little crazy, but I have tried to capture electronically most of the changes we've discussed. So I'm going to flash those up, and then we'll walk through them. There's a handful of them, and once we get through that, the idea is the document as you received it earlier or last week, plus these changes will be the final document, and that's what we would be voting on. So with that, let me share my screen. Okay, that's a little small. Okay. So here are so I'm going to go walk through them one by one. So the first one that we left off was the concept of the recommendation that was around the symmetrical piece of 100 by 100 for the last acre and 300 by 300 at the farmhouse. I know we had some good dialogue on that, where we wanted to get to, but ultimately what we said is, we want to increase the upload speeds of, over time, and we also want to make sure that overall the standards get raised over time as well, to make sure that we can accommodate for some of these new technologies coming in the future. That said, there was a little bit of the disconnect or controversy was really around when does that happen? What are we really trying to accomplish? So there's more work to be done in this space. So the blue is what was in the current document, and then now the red is sort of just talking to a few people here over the break. What we're sort of saying recommended to be replaced by this now. So I'll give everybody about 5 minutes or so to review this and see if you have any comments or questions. Again, the language, we will continue to make it better. This was just sort of making sure we get the concept down and then have a discussion after that. So I'll let you read it and I'll quickly go over it. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to read it. Just walking through it, we know what the standard is today, which is the 100 by 20. And what the idea is, we're saying there's newer technology coming down the pipe over the years. So obviously, one of the things we have to be careful of is to make sure that the upload speeds are increased over time to meet some of the needs. And then overall, the standard should be increased because we do know that there's more and more technology, as we saw this morning, that's going to require more bandwidth as we go forward. Part of it is also in the next term, this was, I thought, was a good recommendation. The next term, one of the things to do is, we don't have a timeline, which is also the reasons for not putting specific numbers, is what is that timeline and what should those numbers be? That is something through additional examples and testing that could be determined what the practical speed could be. So this, I think, is it's a good place where different entities could come together and figure out what that could be. Thoughts, questions, comments?
So one thought I had immediately in the third to the last line on that paragraph where it says continuously reevaluate the standards. I think the objective within our working group was to continuously increase. The idea that we don't set a floor or a ceiling. Is that accurate? Yes. So that's just kind of a given, is we want to continuously. Right. Right, so I think to continuously increase the standards. Yeah, Jennifer's got her hand up.
Yep, go ahead.
I don't have a problem with that. It's the continuously, because as someone who's been in the regulatory body, you can't continuously do it. So maybe seek, every 2 years a review to look at whether the speed should be increased, and if so, how much, something like that, if that's okay. It was just the continuous, you want some
So to increase standards with biannual reviews or something?
Yeah, something like
I don't
that.
know
That's
that I
a-
would put it by, I would just take out the word continuously, just say increase.
Yeah, but you've got to have a review. I'll beg to differ.
Well,
because-
the C talks about time frame, and then that's exactly what the next term working group would work on.
Okay, that's fine. I think, I can't, I'm sorry, my eyes are terrible, so I'm having trouble reading this.
So,
And the red kind of plays with my eyes a little bit.
oh, sorry, yeah.
No,
I
it's
was
not
just trying
bad.
to-
It's not bad. It's
We can
just-
make, that's an easy change.
It's just me. My eyes are almost bleeding anyway, I think. Like, ah. Yeah, toothpicks.
So do you want on a regular basis or not that?
We could just go future needs period, because we reference review in subpoint C.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is where I have a problem. I actually think you don't want to take that out on a regular basis, because the review below is the task force review. This is the review by the government. So I would suggest you do want to keep the regular basis in. That's a different instruction. This is the third instructions for the task force.
Well, and I agree with that too, because you can also, it's also saying not increase the standards one time, it's saying increase the standards on a regular basis.
Yeah,
Yeah, come back and do it again.
and again. I think that's, well, I think that should be figured out with the bottom part, right? Because, I mean, there could be multi-steps to that, I think.
Should we, so on subpoint A, should we add a goal, like significantly raise the standard on upload capacity over time to address the needs of precision agriculture, then comma, with a goal of symmetrical or near symmetrical speeds, just the idea. Jennifer's saying no. She's objecting.
I think that plays into C a little bit, like let's figure out what that means to make sure you address it correctly. Because I think let's say, for example, the speeds go up to 300 by 100, right? That may be okay, may not be okay.
That would be a dreamlike improvement from where we are today.
Well, it depends. It may not be a dream 5 years from now.
I know, today that would be awesome.
So I think what we want to, I think what the working group was trying to call out is, hey, cannot forget upload speeds. They are relevant and important.
Okay.
And I think that's what we're saying. So I think when you evaluate it, then how you want to position that depends on.
Then we set some
testing.
goals, timelines, and more detail.
And I think the timeline actually, that's why I don't think that here we can solve the timeline thing, but that timeline is probably the bigger issue.
And then the coming term?
Yes. So the question is that tomorrow or is that 5 years from now? So.
Okay.
This might
Oh,
make
go
it
ahead.
more complicated, Teddy, but in A, over time to address the needs. Could we consider, rather than address the needs, because it always seems to be backwards, legacy at best here and now. I was thinking, would the group be open to accelerate innovation in precision ag, or is that just splitting hairs?
Well, the title of our working group was Anticipating Future Needs.
I like it. And also, it speaks to the sense of urgency that we have, and it also is not just a reevaluation, it's incentivizing towards the future.
Yes. So that is the only reason I'm going to say it. That's actually in the sentence above the,
Yes.
right? And then we can
Cannot
put
say it too
anticipate in
much,
there.
though.
No, and then I would just share, I like, I think.
Yeah.
Heather had a good suggestion of anticipate.
Yeah.
That work?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Mike Gomes, yes, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem, Teddy. Thanks. I think that the big thing that we've always talked about is some version of toward a nearly symmetrical service standard. And I think we've lost that language. And so if we could pick that up somewhere, because that's the biggest thing. We've tried to say that download is as important, or upload is as important as download. And so just it's near a symmetrical service standard.
Mike, we're going to get back into the same do loop. Again, I think that it's the same thing I think Heather was saying. I don't know if you're okay with it or not, but the goal was to say, why doesn't there should be a specific group that could review, or the next working group of this specific one, the examining needs, can take a look at what that is and come up with what that could look like. Because the where it gets sticky is where symmetrical may not be attainable. You may be able to raise the whole thing. That might be a better way to get there. But definitely making sure that like it doesn't get left behind where it's 1/5 of the download doesn't make sense. So I don't know if we can come up with a specific number today, but this could be a good way to say what it should be.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say nearly, right? And it's the idea of some version of a nearly symmetrical standard. But I get how sticky of an issue it is, for sure. I'm not trying to be difficult.
Other hand, I cannot see. Dr. Adeline?
So I'm wondering if we know what technologies need symmetrical. When we're doing this video conference, if you don't have the data path and the video path lined up, right, you have a lousy conference. That's a fact. But is there research? When I build my research networks, I'm allowing the smart switches to say, I need more download bandwidth and less upload bandwidth, or reverse them. So as we have these new smart switch technologies, until we know which things we're going to use that really need symmetrical, again, like this video conference, to talk symmetrical may be a burden that we don't have to lay on the system right now. That's for a couple examples.
Dale?
So from a historical perspective, this group was formed by the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is set to expire next year. The incoming people who are going to serve on this task force have a 1-year time period to finish up. And if you don't make those recommendations, whatever they are, you may lose that opportunity to do that unless the Farm Bill is either extended along with this task force or it's included in the next task force. So I just suggest you get as much done in your recommendations as you possibly can and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Is there any? Any other questions or comments?
I do have one more. Right before the phrase, therefore, the task force recommends the following. We had a closing statement in our previous one that emphasized how download is for consumption and upload is for production. And I think that's something that we as a working group would like to maintain either at the very opening of the paragraph or right before the therefore the task force.
This sentence, right?
Yes. Yep. Is that right?
Right here?
Yes. That's recommendation.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to figure out where to put
Kind of
it.
drop it in, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, can we live with this? Not just everything.
It's not a normal way of thinking of things, so it's just to make it clear it's for this purpose.
How about this?
It has to do with decision-making.
Oh, no, I'm just saying it's for purposes of this report or purposes of precision agriculture is all I'm saying, is the way it's reading, it makes it sound like it's a fact for everything, but that is not a fact for everything. So I'm just trying to clarify.
Ah, I see.
Except also the entertainment industry and video production, uploading. My curse.
No, that's good suggestion, Jenna. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes? Okay. Oh, Andy? Okay.
I was just going to ask whether you needed a motion, Teddy.
No, we're gonna do all that together. Just, I'm just letting it simmer for a little while, so. Okay, the next one was on page 6. Julie, you pointed this out, I just wanna make sure I get it right. The current recommendation reads, improve rural utility service grants and loans for cell tower construction. Finding access to dark fiber could be additional boon. The word cell needs to be removed. Tower construction is fine. And working group is okay with that?
That was what
Yeah,
Mark Suggs, I don't see him online, but he was our go-to on that. Yep.
okay. Page 13, that was recommendation number 13. Dr. Bajwa, you said we should include the BIA in that one, so we'll make sure we get that included. Page 14, Julie, this was on the adoption jobs. One thing in the cut and paste that got missed was fully adopt the bill. That was missing at the end, so that caught that. I think that was pretty minor. Page 17, that was recommendation number 32 in the adoption jobs. That was a discussion we just had here at the end. To say data must be retrieved in its original form without manipulation in near real time. Ryan, you good with that too?
Teddy, I just want to make sure, when we say fully adopt the bill, is that the Last Acre Act that's referenced there on the recommendation too?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a copy of the report pulled up right now to do a find to make sure we don't contradict ourselves within the document. Because I know we referenced Last Acre Act, but it was in a specific context. There were specific elements of it that we liked. Do you guys remember?
Julia, Last Acre is Senate 2542, correct? What is Senate 719?
That is the Precision Ag Loan Act.
Oh, Precision Ag Loan, okay.
Sorry, I'm just moving around. This was it, right? This was the one. And then the one that Julie was referencing was right here. Sorry, it's. Make it bigger. And then in the original recommendation at the end of this, it said, and adopt this bill, but it didn't make it in the cut and paste.
Teddy, is this the place to raise some concerns about the Last Acre Act?
Well, if you have a concern, it's in the parking lot item to talk
Okay.
about that, but if you're opposed to adding this piece here, there'll be the time to,
I'll wait.
okay?
Can I make a comment on that?
Yep.
Could we also add the companion House bill now that that's been introduced?
Number 36, so this
That
one?
is, let's see,
This right
under, we're back to last acre, Teddy, USDA Reconnect should pivot to prioritizing on-farm connectivity. Yes,
Okay.
number 2.
So add which piece here?
And companion House Bill HR 6142. 6142. Well, I have the floor. And we've
HR.
parked last acre. The recommendation is that USDA Reconnect should pivot to prioritizing on-farm connectivity as exemplified by last acre. So if not adding and fully adopt the bill helps get this amenable to the task force, I think we would be willing to do that.
I think that's where we were coming from. I can't remember what our sticking point was, but I remember it's kind of like there was some speed, but then Andy had another concern.
You know, I guess I would have an objection to fully adopt the last acre bill because there are a couple of things in there that could be tweaked so that it benefits more farmers and so that it is a little less cumbersome. So I mean, I'm willing to wait till later on, but I just want you to know that as it stands now, I wouldn't fully support that.
But would you support this element, like what Julie said, you know, exemplified in the Last Acre Act, basically should prioritize on-farm connectivity? I think that's the point we can all agree on.
I can agree
right?
on that.
Is that it's important. Right.
And then companion bill, whichever the other one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, this next one, we talked about it, and then we talked about including a new recommendation at the end of the adoption jobs with there was a piece that said Congress should adopt Precision Ag Loan Act S.719, establishing a department of USDA to administer low-interest loans to producers and ranchers interested in precision agriculture.
Even though the act apparently doesn't say this, but I'm just saying either establishing or authorizing a department of USDA. It just seems to me like they've got some capability there. They have some horses in the stable that could take care of that job.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the next ones are just a few minor things that came in over the last few days. Just wanted to show you kind of how we might treat it, but I wanted the working group chairs to weigh in here, so, oops, what did I just do? Okay, page 31. So this first, is everybody able to see it, or should I make it bigger? Make it bigger.
Let me cover my left eye.
Then it doesn't
Actually, my left
fit.
eye can see it, yes.
The idea was, there's nothing here to change from a language standpoint. It's like this first sentence goes on for a very long time. So the idea was to just break it up into, sorry, I had to make it a little bit smaller. Agricultural lands beyond the reach of symmetric speed fiber must not be left behind. Put a period there and then say instead should be prioritized for immediate deployment, et cetera, et cetera. So it just reads better. It's not changing any of the context, but
Yeah, you don't have to say but instead, just say they should be prioritized.
yeah.
I
Yep.
like it.
Okay. What was one recommendation? Can you just, how about something in between? Okay. Page 4, yeah.
Since you passed, I got on a late.
Yeah, we'll never come back, so yes. let's go now. Oh, yeah.
End of first sentence, first
Yeah.
line has a bounce,
Yep.
and then second line has another one. So please make it clear.
Sounds good. We'll make that change. Okay. Jimmy, I know you had some thoughts on page 48. There was something about RDOF and being able to go retroactively go back. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that real quick. Get to the page. Right here.
My concern with that was that RDOF has already been implemented, and I'm not sure how we would retroactively authorize a group at USDA to go back and help administrate or oversee. I'm all about oversight. I think it's important, but I just don't know that you can retroactively do that.
If we were to make say we strike that specific program name and just say generally, consider them as a subcontractor for.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. I just was concerned that it would run into a wall with being RDOF specific.
Sure. That's a very practical point, and it's one where I go, darn it.
Okay. Okay. On page 79, under continuity of ag systems. Let me get to it real quick. Just give me a second. Apologize for jumping around, but this is the easiest way to get this done.
You're doing great, especially on the little,
Mhm.
with no mouse.
Okay. Here we go. Go back where it says the sentence. It's critical to, yeah. Okay, right here, it's critical. And I think it should say it's critical to our agricultural system. That those
Security.
qualities- Huh?
Security.
Security, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. See, I want to make sure we put the right thing in there. Okay. And then in the main document, the last one's on page 84. There is one last sentence that it ends with this right here. Is there something else we should be putting there? Or is it weather conditions? Or do,
Oh, it should be optimal, not optimum for planting in the sentence above.
yep, I get that, yep. Do we want to strike this sentence, or is there some other way to work it back in?
I think they're trying to lay the groundwork to make the point that it's a high demand. It's like your traffic jam time, right? It's your peak commute time for usage of the systems when everybody's going in the field at the same time. So it should be recognized this is a high demand or peak demand
Yeah.
time.
High demand, I think.
Demand, okay.
And I noted that optimum should probably be optimal in this line above that.
And demand, right? Oops.
demand, and I don't know if it's time or production window or whatever.
Put time in, I will see if it is a better word. Got it though. Okay. Got what we're trying to say there. Okay, so that's that. One of the changes that we still need to make, somehow in the, putting the new document together, in Appendix A, we lost the working group members, so that's the change that will be coming. We'll put the working group members from the mapping and analyzing lands back in with their titles, so we'll make sure to include that. So in the document you have today, that's not there, but that will get added back in. Now, one thing is, some working groups had their charges in their appendix, some don't. Should we include the charges? What's the consensus from the team? For each working group has its own charges, so should we put that back? Okay. Okay, what I'm getting is consensus should be. Okay, and then there's just a simple word that we just need to change from template to guideline, I think, which is fine. And then the rest are pretty simple stuff, so we'll make those changes. So that is all the documents, and then, yep.
One other area, sorry, it's already on it.
Nope.
Page 1732.
Yep.
This is more of a point for discussion and conversation. But 32A says producer-owned data. The question is, should it be producer-controlled data? And the question of ownership starts to get muddy when the farm entity may not be the same owner as the piece of equipment or the other person doing the job. So if you have an ASP spray for you, who should control the data? The theory is, well, it's valuable to the ASP, they executed the job and need to maybe bill for it, but the farmer that had the work done for them should get to control of that data as well, but they don't own the machine that created the data. So if we say producer owned, that gets muddy, at least the feedback I'm getting from Deere folks, that we've moved to producer controlled data to alleviate that. So I guess open for feedback and conversation from the group, but there's gray areas of when you don't own the machine and you have it, or if you have a family partnership where one family member owns the equipment and the other owns the land, or vice versa, then okay, who owns the data versus control of the data? So I'll leave it there, but open for feedback from the group.
I would just say we need to encourage that terms and conditions of the relationship between that vendor and the farmer need to be explicit. If we try and start putting that into federal requirements and stuff like that, then we start creating something that's, I think, beyond the task force, right? But at the end of the day, that farmer and that vendor have a relationship, right? That business relationship should determine, have included in it that data belongs to one, the other, or both.
Yeah, and I think from the feedback I'm getting generally for that situation, the terms are producer controlled versus producer owned. So I don't know if we want to take that in and adjust it or not, but
I don't know, Ryan. I'm not an attorney, but it seems like that nuance is interesting.
Yeah.
Because you think about the data, I'm thinking of it in a physical sense, tied to the field, tied to the person who purchased the inputs or the process. When you think about it, that's a very interesting thing, because you have landowners, you have tenant farmers. In Illinois, that's more than 65% of the farmers are usually absentee owners. And then you have contract providers, but yet they're being paid for that service. So I know that our working group had been very conscious about the effort to be very farmer-centric. So basically, the farmer is at the center of decisions, has access to all their data, owns it in the sense that they decide, when you say like control, but in order to control it, you would think you'd have to have the ownership ultimately. So I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no,
Maybe we could find some attorneys in the room telling
No,
me
I
what you
think-
think.
No, and that's the
I
point
think-
of
I think
bringing it
Ryan-
up.
Ryan is making that point, which is, I
Yeah.
think control makes it wider, whereas owned, that's a whole nother discussion we can get into. Yeah, yeah. So control though would actually make it farmer centric.
You would think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because used to be controlled, yeah. Yeah, we could do that.
I don't know, should it? I don't know, it's kind of.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental definition difference between owned and controlled. But as long as we understand that this should be farmer-centric, and so I definitely support producer or farmer-owned and controlled, I worry about going strictly farmer-controlled, because to me, that removes the inherent reason we put these forward, which is the producer should control their destiny when it comes to data. Are we okay with producer-owned and controlled?
I think so. I mean, I think that's how do we best articulate the intent? And it starts to get gray because, I mean, Heather, in your example, it's like, okay, the landowner, well, if they're contracting it based on yield, well, then maybe they're the producer. But if they're just cash renting the ground, maybe they're not the they're not the producer. And so how do we make sure that, yes, the producer that is responsible from input to output is
I mean,
they have
producer-
access and can move the data to make the best decisions for themselves. Like, however we articulate that the best, I
Well,
think.
producer owned and or controlled, because I do default to Jimmy's comment, is we're not going to create a federal regulation here, but, you know, the goal is to make sure that we're discussing this in agriculture and protecting producers, specifically with everything we have going on around cybersecurity and instability. So if and or, you know, qualifies that, whether they own it or they control it, I actually would have to default to Mike and Dale to make sure they agree with that, but.
But maybe also add that qualifier of what our intent is. You know, comma, such that the farmer has control of the destiny when it comes to their data. So that we're clear on what our intent is, regardless of whether the words say it or not.
Okay, we can include that. Is there somebody online? No.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that, like on our farm, we can allow or share with other users from within our operations center or something. We could identify where they have APIs in place, you know, for direct sharing of raw data, but that'd be cool if we could do that across the board on everything.
Right, yeah.
We also add maybe just because I'm not a grower, producer, farmer, there's a lot of names for grower, producer, farmer, operator. And I think at the core, as Joy said, the intent is that the farmer's business intelligence, the data from their operation is owned and controlled by them, and it's up to them to give permission to other people. If there are lease agreements, they can cover that in their lease agreements. I don't think that's for us. It's, in general, we might want to consider someplace using all of the terms. Grower equals, producer equals, because I think when Ryan touched upon, or perhaps it was Julie, that was the producer of the data Well, that, for me as a technologist, sounded like a device or a sensor. And I'm like, the person that, the device doesn't own it, and the owner of that device maybe not own it either. It's the grower who's operating that land should have control and the ability to give permission.
So maybe, along that vein, maybe we just say farmer-owned or farmer, so that there isn't maybe some confusion. Is that, okay?
Can I add something? I mean, and maybe I'm way overthinking this because I live in the world of the IT MSP side of things as well as providing broadband service, but there are many times where we have to do reports based on aggregated data. We have to have access to that, right? We're not taking that personal information of that individual or that business, but we aggregate information. It's no different than what big tech does when they aggregate a lot of information. They're not taking what Joy does and what Andy does and what you do, but they still have to have access to that. So I do think there's a reason that a vendor like a John Deere or Nextech or someone would need access or use of that data, but it's more at an aggregated level than a direct level. And that's where the privacy comes in, is when it goes beyond aggregate and goes down to the individual. So we just got to be careful not to mess that up by getting too prescriptive.
I agree, and I think that's the intent of the recommendation as well, so. All right, we'll see what the best word is to use there, but I think we're aligned on the intent. We just have to get the right wording there. Yeah, oh, sorry. No, I was just saying the intent is there to make it farmer-centric, so we'll find the right language between producer, grower, farmer, which one to use, and what to include in that specific recommendation, so.
Can I just mention not use grower, because this does apply to livestock operations.
Right. Okay. Might be farmer, yeah, we'll see. Farmer and rancher, I think that's the way it's used, but yeah. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions on the document or concerns?
On the last Acre Act.
Well, yes, now we get to other parking lot
Sorry.
items. Yeah. That's good, that's good, we're on the same page, we're on the same page. Now, as far as the document as it's written today, I think those are all the changes. So you received the copy from last week, and then what we just reviewed in the last 30 minutes is all the changes that we'll be making to that document. So the voting that we'll do after we have this discussion is the document last week plus minus these changes we discussed just now. Okay, so before we move on to voting, though, there are a couple of things. Andy, I know you wanted to add them to the parking lot. One was around private network, and then the other one was the Last Acre Act. So the discussion really here is, what are some of the concerns? But then, does this impact the document as it stands today? Do we need to make any changes, or is this something for the next task force and working groups to take a look at? So, with that, maybe I'll turn it to you to tee up the concern.
Well, sure. We did have a good conversation about this with a couple of us during the break, and I think that as I look back through the document, it does seem to be pretty articulate, speaking about last acre with regard to the usage and potential usage of private networks. So I would suggest that perhaps in a final review by staff and others that be looked at, and if that's the agreed upon premise, that's clear and is exhibited throughout the document.
Do you remember the specific issues, potential issues? Oh, tell me later. Tell me later.
On the, okay, so that's on the Last Acre Act. Any discussion required on the private networks?
Actually, that was the private networks.
Same thing? It was kind of
Well,
the same?
No, two different things.
Yes,
But
that's right.
that comment that just got added was for the private network discussion.
Okay. And then any potential issues with the Last Acre Act?
Yeah, I did actually sit down and read the Last Acre Act cover to cover not long ago, and there are a couple areas in there that give me pause, and in particular, because I sit on this task force as a small grower, in that one of the apparent requirements is that eligibility revolves around being a full-time producer. And I can tell you in my part of Pennsylvania, or actually most of Pennsylvania, and a lot of states in the Northeast, that's kind of not very common. Almost everybody has a full-time job in order to support their farm and produce food at a lower cost. And so I'd ask that as we all look at that document, that we're clear that anybody who farms should be eligible, small farmer, part-time farmer, or someone who's supporting their agricultural operation with an all-farm job. That's one topic. Next topic was, it wasn't clear to me that private networks would be eligible. And so I think that we've circled around to a great understanding of the validity and the power of private networks. And I think we should be clear that, farmer may decide that it makes sense to build a private network, and that should be funded. And then the last point that I'll raise is that there appears to be a challenge process in the legislation that allows a third party to suggest that no, Mr. Farmer or Mrs. Farmer or Ms. Farmer, you shouldn't be awarded money to build a private network. I should build that for you as a telecom provider. And my concern with that is that's an additional layer of burden and proof and paperwork that is going to make the utilization of Last Acre funding and processes more cumbersome and unlikely. And so I'd ask that however this works, either individually as members or whether you want to say something as a group here today, that whatever we do, we should make sure that any farmer of any size has access for whatever they need, and that they shouldn't be hindered by someone looking over their shoulder suggesting, no, this isn't what you should do.
Joy?
So I'm not sure we get the opportunity here to rewrite that bill. So it has to do with how we express our support and with what qualifications our support comes. So there's a time-honored tradition of support with possible amendments is a term of art that we could use that might be squishy enough to get us off the hook here. Or in those places where it's specifically mentioned in recommendations, that it's clarified that we are in support of the spirit of the law, which is to bring connectivity to the last acre, i.e. in the farm field.
I think that's what we did when we referenced it in our subgroup, was just to say we support these tenets that are found in that act, not necessarily the act in its entirety. I think. I noticed we had a couple questions down there on the bottom. Is it Gregory Hall and somebody else
Yeah,
on the
we'll
bottom
take a
right?
look at that. I think Julie has a response first, and then we'll take a look at that.
I'm going to try and remember it all, Andy. I do see what you're mentioning around covered producer, where it does say the majority of the gross income must come from farming. I did want to mention, and I think this could be a potential, not recommendation for the task force, but as this bill moves forward. It does include a call out for limited resource farmer or rancher. And maybe that's where we could remove that the majority of the gross income comes from farming to help where you are. I do want to add that co-ops are now included. So that was actually a step to help smaller farmers pull together to be able to apply. It does support private networks. I know the way it's written is very telco based, but we deploy private networks only. So it does cover that. And I forgot the final thing.
The challenge process.
I agree with you on the challenge process. And then I would just say from Joy, to your point, I hope that what the update we made, that it prioritizes on-farm connectivity, can help us get to a yes on the recommendation.
I want to make a comment that, USDA has a definition for farmers. I don't know why we need to change. I mean, as Joey said, I'm not saying that we need to make some recommendation to change or we need to do anything to change the bill, but USDA does have a definition for a farmer or rancher, an income-based definition.
Jennifer?
And I'll be real quick, but I very much supported being careful how we cite the principles of the bill, especially with a bill that's not passed yet, since you never know what it's going to look like. So I just wanted to support Joy on her comments earlier.
Okay. Other questions or comments? All right, I'm not seeing any more hands up or questions or comments. So here's where we are. So again, like I said earlier, the document from last week, plus the changes we discussed above, the last two things here in the parking lot item, the private network, it's good as long as we're consistent how we refer through it throughout the document, so we have to make sure we review that carefully. And then also that the spirit of the Last Acre Act is supported properly, and if there's areas where we disagree, we got to make sure we point that out. So it should be not too complicated to make. Any other comments? All right, with that, I would love to move for us into a voting process, and so only task force members are allowed to vote. What we'll do is we'll have Christy call out your name, and then you can either say approved, not approved, or you can dissent. You can approve a portion of the document if you want to, and put some comments there from your end. So we'll go through that, and then at the end, we'll kind of see where we land. So Christy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we'll begin the voting. Teddy Backelli,
Approved.
Dr. Michael Adeline,
Approved.
Dale Artho,
Approved.
the Honorable Dan Watermeyer,
Approved.
Dr. Shrikala Bajwa,
Approve.
Andy Bater,
Approved.
Julie Bushell,
Approved.
Anthony Dillard,
Approved.
Michael Gomes,
Approved.
Heather Hampton Nodal,
Approved.
Robert Hance, Ryan Krogh,
Approve.
Jennifer Manor,
Approved.
Joy Sterling,
Approved.
Jimmy Todd.
Approved.
Okay. That's it, all approved.
All right, well, thank you very much. That was good. I'm glad good discussion, good engagement. I love that. I think we got to a really good spot. Again, next steps for this is you will see, we flashed up earlier a little bit of kind of what it would look like with pictures and stuff. So you had the meat of it now, and then we'll add all the fun stuff afterwards. So I think there's a couple of pictures that'll make it in there. Also, the document will have some tabs in it so we can point out, which part belongs to the working groups and things like that. One thing I will say to every task force member is we will have a printed version of this, so not now, or if you want now, but you can send me an email address, your email address as well as an address where we can send the physical copy if you want to. And then the other thing I would ask you, if you're okay with it, is to get a digital signature from you. So you might have a page where we could put all the signatures on there. So, but I will follow up with email on this to make sure we get all that, and then that will go into the final document. I'm expecting maybe a week from now we will have the final document. We'll circulate that around, make sure there's no last things pending or things that look wrong. And then from that, I will be officially submitting it to the chairwoman of the FCC as well as the Secretary of Ag on behalf of this task force. So that will be for this term.
Question.
Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. In our first round, we also made some recommendations for future research or follow-up, at least at a working group level and I think at a task force level. Do we anticipate any sort of brainstorming today, not in that document, but maybe additional to say, we flagged a few things that would warrant follow-up or not? I don't know if we want a collective thought process on that.
There's lots of areas, so I'm open to that. So I'm just expressing my opinion on this one. I think several of you will be on the next one. So one option is to kind of collect the thoughts now. Another one may be to collect them at the beginning of the next term to make sure that gets reviewed. So either way, any preference from anyone? Would you like to?
I just didn't know who may have reapplied or who may not. That's all. It was just kind of a how do we collect any ideas into a basket, so to speak, so that people would have them as they started up.
That's a fair point. So what I'll do is when I ask you for the signatures, I will maybe include that as well to make sure if there's other future things. I know some things we've pointed them out in the document, but maybe there's other things to your point that are not in there. So I'll ask for if there are future considerations that the next task force should take a look at. That send me those, and then we'll collate them together and have them ready for the next task force. Good suggestion. Any other comments or questions before I turn it over to Christy? Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Maybe we can just say thank you to you for leading us, and thank you for getting us started.
No, thank you so much. I was actually going to say the same thing. I mean, I think the majority of the work was done by the working groups, which I appreciate, and I appreciate all of you leading the working groups and being subject matter experts on them. I think there was a depth of information in this, and this is something that I think a lot of the federal agencies can take forward, not only as recommendations, but I also love how it came together. Just going through the process, like I mentioned on the last call, I was trying to figure out how to put the recommendations together. And ultimately, they were so good and well thought of that it's like, no, we shouldn't tamper with that. We should just have the recommendations as they came from the working group. So kudos to the teams for doing that. And please reinforce my thank you and the thank you of the other task force members to those working groups. Also want to thank Christy and Tom and Emily for helping us throughout this process. I know this is, you probably took you through a rodeo through what we can and can't do and pushing the boundaries in many instances. So that was really nice. And also from the USDA, we appreciate your support throughout the process, Adeline. And so it was really good. So, okay.
We had a hand from Dale.
Dale, I thought you had your hand up, so I didn't want to take away. Oh,
I did. I just want to say thanks. What I really appreciated in this was the education that I've been a party of. You've got a good group of folks there, and it's been a pleasure on my part to get to work with them. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Oh, great. Thank you, Dale. I want to reinforce that. So with that, thanks, everyone. And then, Christy, I'll turn it over to you for some logistics.
Okay. So on the theme of thank yous, I want to add a few as well. I'd like to thank Chair Bekele, Vice Chair Adeline, and members of the task force and its working groups for all of your hard work on the final report. As I mentioned at the opening, this is the last meeting of this term of the task force. As we close this term, I'd like to recognize the contributions of our partners at USDA, the deputy DFOs, the working group staff liaisons, the commission meeting room staff, and everyone who helps us with the work of the task force here at the commission. Although this term is coming to a close, we're working on recharting the task force as required by the Farm Bill of 2018. We expect the new charter to be effective by December 2nd, when this one expires. And we will have further announcements about appointments of members for the new term as we finalize plans. We expect many members to be back with us next time, but some of you will not be. And so we wanted to offer special thanks to those of you who will not be returning to the task force in the new year. We appreciate all of your hard work and willingness to share your expertise over the years, and we thank all of you for another successful term of the task force, and we look forward to continuing this important work next year. We have a couple of logistics announcements for you all. First, please leave your name tents. We'll be around to pick those up, and we try to reuse them as much as we can, so please leave them on the table. The other thing is I heard some of the members express interest in a group photo of all of the members for this term. So for those of you who'd like to be involved in the photo, please linger around a few minutes, and we'll try to organize this and do it fairly efficiently, because I know some of you probably have travel plans. But please hang around after that for the group photo. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Bekele to adjourn the meeting, and with all of our thanks here at the Commission for all of the hard work that you all have done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christy, for all the support. So with that, we'll call the meeting to a close, and thanks, everyone, and have a safe travel back home. Thank you.
Teddy, is it appropriate? Does everyone know if you're rejoining or not rejoining?
Yeah, we can talk about it. So I will not be joining the task force for the next term. I know several of you were asking me about that. There's just too much on the plate, and I feel like we're in a good spot, and also it's good for somebody else to bring it to a close as there's one more term left, so.
I thought it would be helpful if everyone knew that. We could really thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, George. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we'll have more announcements as we get going with appointments. We'll have more announcements about leadership for the next term as we move forward with that.
All right. Yes. Thank you.